All right, here we are with iHunt, a project by TTRPG venerable writer Olivia Hill. It's myself, Olivia, and Peter on the mic today, and we're going to be talking about their new project, iHunt. Olivia, hello.
Wow, venerable. Hi, I'm Olivia. You can call me Liv. I make games. You might have heard of me from my work in World of Darkness, Shadowrun, like Leverage, Marvel Heroic, a number of things. But now I'm doing iHunt, which is going to be launching by the end of the year.
That's awesome. For reference listeners, you're hearing this probably in December 2019. And yes, so iHunt I was exposed to via the first novel that came out. I've picked it up. I've almost finished it, and it's pretty good. I like it a lot. Could you give us the premise of iHunt from your own words?
Yeah. iHunt is basically Buffy meets Uber. It's killing monsters in the gig economy is the tagline for the book, and it's about a young woman who hunts monsters using an app that's like Uber or Fiverr or whatever. She gets contracts for a very small amount of money, comparable to what she's doing, and she goes out and she slaughters monsters for cash. And she does this as a second job. Her first job is as a theme park attendant. And basically that's how she makes ends meet. She's not like, there's no glamour to this. It's all about like avoiding eviction. It's a story about vampires and demons where eviction is scarier than Dracula.
I feel that's awfully topical given the current state of things for most people in, I'm gonna out myself and say my age bracket.
Yeah.
I'll date myself there. So yeah, killing monsters in the gig economy. That is pretty current topic, actually. A lot of those apps are out there, and I think this is straight out of iHunt. You bring it up almost immediately that they do nothing but basically destabilize established fields and cause chaos so that other companies can come in and sweep up the pieces, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like with Airbnb, of course, it's hurt the hotel industry, but it's also hurt like real estate because people are now buying up prime properties in cities, essentially gentrifying neighborhoods in order to get like, pennies on the dollar for shitty apartments for, one night rentals when you have, underprivileged people who usually live in these urban environments who are basically getting shuffled off into the suburbs, to have shittier life quality. That way these people can turn a buck.
Yep. What do they call that then? Renovictions is the new hot word. For reference, for listeners who aren't on the up and up, sponsored by Nobody's based out in Vancouver, Canada. And yeah.
You guys got the Hollywood people coming in for Airbnbs.
People have been coming in since the Queen visited back in '85.
Oh my God.
And they've never stopped. So yeah, no one here is owning property. And yeah, Airbnb and those ride-sharing apps are one of the things that are definitely contributing towards that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any country or city that gets those types of economies immediately sees a price spike that can't ever be turned back. It's a bell that can't be unrung.
Yep.
So now that we've enumerated how much of a dystopian nightmare the gig economy is, how absolutely cynical is it that it's been turned into vampire hunting?
There's a sort of like weird paradox I feel like to the iHunt universe because so for one, Lana, the protagonist of iHunt, and all of the other iHunters, they're doing this thing that is deadly. Like they're hunting monsters, they're hunting vampires and werewolves and demons and stuff, and they could die at any given time for a couple $1,000s, whatever. So it was sort of inspired by not too long ago. There was news about Peter Thiel, one of the most famous gig economy guys. He's been paying millennials for their blood.
I remember this story
because he's getting blood transfusions in order to prolong his life. And this sounds like satire to anyone who hasn't actually seen the fact that it's true. And so I saw that and I was like, oh my God, that's disgusting. He's definitely a fiend from hell. And
nah,
that's sort of
just
where it
rich.
came from. Yeah. He's just, and that's it. That's it. So
It's so mundane and boring. He's just rich.
yeah, absolutely. And that's the sort of the other side of iHunt is that you have these monsters. Like I just wrote one yesterday for the game who is a CFO of a Fortune 500 company, and one of the points is like you're hired to kill the guy because he's the CFO of a private equity firm. And private equity, if someone doesn't know, is basically these big companies who they exist to buy other companies, to run them into the ground, and to profit off of closing them. There was a big the big story that we've all heard of recently was Toys R Us, who was, a massively successful toy franchise, and they were run into the ground by a private equity firm. They were basically forced to become insoluble, and then everyone in the company was fired. Like everyone was laid off, but they made millions and millions of dollars off of this.
Yeah.
And it's this utterly like soulless, heartless, terrible thing that these people do, and it's just peak capitalism. But so there's this demon who is the CFO of one of these companies, and his argument is that essentially he's doing it because he feeds off of suffering, and he has to manage the amounts of suffering that comes in and comes out. So he's closing businesses and he's feeding off of the people who are losing their jobs and livelihoods, but he is not doing it in such a way that it destabilizes the entire economy. So his argument is he's actually better than a human in his position because the humans just take unnecessary risks.
Oh my God, he's subsistence farming.
Exactly. So the demon is arguing that he's basically better than a human in the position, and the eye hunter who's killing them, if they kill him, they're going to ultimately do more harm to the world because he is better than a human in his position.
That's true. I understand it. Still get the guillotine.
Yes, absolutely.
There's this wonderful line from James Gunn's original superhero movie with Rainn Wilson called Super, where and just to show how ridiculous this movie is, Kevin Bacon's the villain. and the movie is completely upfront that Rainn Wilson's a crazy person in a superhero costume. He's not a superhero.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he's just like, you're just going to kill me? I'm a drug dealer. I sell heroin to like rich kids. All right. You think killing me is going to make the world a better place? And Rainn Wilson, with a knife welded to a wrench, because that's his superhero weapon, looks up to him and goes, I won't know until I try, and just starts killing him.
Oh my God.
It's that scene pops into mind thinking about that, where it's like, oh, come on, look at me. I'm subsistence farming.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is ethical.
And then there's sort of a it's like clean needles, right? Like it's not something that you want to be doing, but clearly it's better than the alternative, right?
Yeah, Jesus Christ, give them the needles.
Yeah, right. So the other side of iHunt though is that, like, of course it's dystopian and cynical, but also you get to kill the monsters. Right. So in the end, you do get to kill that demon. You don't get to kill Jeff Bezos. Like in the real world, like Amazon is making what, $11 trillion in 2018 and paying $0 in taxes, and they're just completely driving labor standards into the pits. And we don't get to murder him. Right. But in iHunt, you do.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's kind of that catharsis through play right there, right?
Exactly. So it's like there was an old episode of Beavis and Butthead when I was a teenager where Butthead is slapping Beavis and he's telling him stop it because this hurts and it sucks, and then afterwards Butthead stops. And then Beavis is like, wait a second, do that again. And Butthead doesn't understand. And he's, it sucks that you slap me, but when you stop, that's kind of cool.
Lordy. I think it's the first
So that's iHunt. It's like managing the slapping and not slapping.
Mm-hmm. So the gig economy we talked about, of course, the fact that it's been reduced to the once vaguely noble superhero tradition of hunting monsters. Like, of course, the allusions to Buffy are obvious, but now it's just a job people risk their lives to do because they got bills and medical bills to pay. Mm-hmm. What seems to feature heavily in iHunt is the idea of living in the shadow of Disneyland. Like,
Oh yeah,
again,
yeah,
I'm halfway through the book, and like it's oppressively there.
yeah,
Do you want to
yeah.
comment on that? Do you have like any ties to sort of that sort of I don't know, background, or like did you grow up
Absolutely.
around Disneyland?
Yeah, I grew up basically in two places. Like I grew up all over. I was raised on a truck for the first few years of my life, and we moved a lot growing up. But most of my life I spent living in the really rural, like backwoods Appalachian part of Ohio. Then the other half I spent living like less than a mile from Disneyland.
Okay.
Um, yeah, all of my family worked at Disneyland, and like all of my friends and family worked at Disneyland. If you're not familiar with Disneyland in Southern California, they hire like I want to say like 35,000 people in that area. So if you live in the Orange County, Southern California area, you probably know a Disneyland employee. Um,
To to
it's
to give you some
yeah,
perspective, 35,000 people is almost like a fifth of the population of my hometown.
yeah. Well,
Give or
and
take
that's
some
that's
bad
just
math.
yeah, and that's just Disneyland proper. Because of course there are hotels all around Disneyland. There's 50, 60 hotels that are all massively staffed. There's restaurants. There's other resorts in the area. There's actually another theme park called Knott's Berry Farm that's nearby that hires another 10 to 15,000, I think. Um, and so basically this industry is that area. It is Anaheim, it is Garden Grove, it is Orange County, and it's sort of leached out into everything. So even if you don't necessarily know someone who works at Disneyland, you know people who live in the periphery of Disneyland. Like their job, their livelihood is predicated on Disney and Disney's success.
Yeah, if it's not Disneyland, then it's the restaurants on the highway leading up to it that make big bucks off of it in the tourist season, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so immersed that like when you go to school there, if you go to high school there, you'll get brochures for like career colleges, and the thing that they're trying to advertise is you can be a chef for one of the satellite companies that's servicing Disneyland.
Oh,
Like
it's
everything is like begins and ends with the mouse.
right, and that's so. I don't know. It seems these days that's a lot more like a poetic thing to put into a book like this, because why things like Uber and all that are eating up the real life. Disney's
Hmm.
eating up pop culture.
Yeah,
Like you can't just be poor in North America. You have to be poor and wear a mouse hat. And then when you go
yeah.
home to watch stuff and unwind at the end of the day, the mouse is there.
It's unavoidable. Yeah, there's no escaping it.
Yeah. Disneyland's insane too, isn't it? Like the actual land is built on a swamp and has like a bunker under it. Like it's this
Oh,
huge concrete jungle.
that's actually oh that's sorry, Disney World in Florida,
I wasn't
which
aware
is
there was a difference between the two. I thought it was just one big park.
no, there's actually there's like seven parks.
Oh my
There's
god.
one in the first one is the one in California. That's the one that's basically it was built in California because Walt Disney worked in Hollywood, of course, making cartoons. Um, and he wanted to build a theme park that was nearby that could service that interest. Um, right after Walt died, they built one in Florida, which is Disney World, which is physically bigger. Um, he worked on it, and he was involved in it, but it was finished and opened after he died. And then there's also Tokyo, Shanghai, Hong Kong, Paris. I think that's it. I can't remember, but yeah, the one in California is the original. It's like the
Okay.
the, the flagship.
I always thought the Florida one was like the one that Walt personally did was the original, just because I don't know a lot about Disneyland or Disney World. But like,
No,
it's like this huge mausoleum to pride. Like Walt
it is.
Disney, Walt Disney built a goddamn giant concrete bunker city complex, like an arcology for Disneyland in a swamp.
Yeah, it's really weird. Like
But like,
because of course Disneyland was really successful, the one in California. He built it, and it's sort of admirable, a lot of the things that he did, like trying to build a place for families to go that was like clean and fun and wholesome and stuff. And he built this thing, and it was really successful, and he made so much money, and there was just like this drive, this hubris, where he just needed to like dominate another area. And so of course Florida is like the armpit of the universe as far as, you know, building territory goes, and that's literally
it's awfully wet there.
Yeah, it is. And he built it like away from the city centers and stuff. Like at the time you had to travel from civilization for quite a while to get to it, and it was just like they uprooted a swamp and they built, like you said, in Arcology, there's this huge, massive tunnel complex under the grounds. And it's really kind of weird and cool. If you're a Disney employee, you hear all of these stories about like the sort of the seedy side and the truth of it. So it's absurd, like how much just ridiculous like audacity it took to build that place. And yeah, it's the first real testament to what Disney has become.
Yeah, and like it lends itself to that Peter Thiel reference, where it's like Walt didn't even personally build that; some other rich guy did. It's just rich people. It wasn't even one guy with a huge vision. It was just, put it in the swamp.
Yeah, and he started it, but then he died, and like that's one of the thing that you hear the most of in Disneyland whenever you're working there. The single phrase that you'll hear the most is, Walt wouldn't have liked this. Like Walt wouldn't have approved. And for it's weird. It's like cult behavior in a way, because all of these people are very much like invested in, you know, what Walt would have thought. But then also it's kind of true, because like we know who he was. He wrote a lot. He's got a lot of, you know, correspondences on the book. And as much as he was a flawed person and like he had his prejudices and stuff, like he seemed to have wanted good. Yeah, like we'll
blow by that. There's not enough time in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. There's like he has his issues, but he was trying to do things the way that he felt was good, and then as soon as he was out of the picture, like it just like went crazy.
Yeah.
Then of course, like he was also you know, there are great pictures out there if you go looking at the Disney animation strike. It was the first big strike in Hollywood and one of the biggest strikes in America. And there are some great like they did marches outside of the Disney offices, the animators did, and because we're talking about Disney artists, we're talking about really skilled, really great craftspeople, they built these giant floats of like Walt being guillotined and stuff. It's so cool.
So all that stuff is definitely somewhere in the Florida site, in that concrete jungle, and when they find it after we're gone, it's going to paint a very different history. It's like, oh, that's what happened. That's why they kept talking about Walt's frozen head. They guillotined him and put it on display to warn everyone else about not paying a fair wage.
Absolutely.
It's going to be a weird post-apoc.
Oh.
So I felt that it was prudent to bring that up because Disney and its influence in, I guess, today and geographically that area, those areas of the world is just everywhere in iHunt. The idea that it really feels like the baby steps to those Shadowrun free company land areas where, you know, you're born and you die in a company setting.
Well, you know, I don't know how much people pay attention to these things in the news, but it's California is often on fire. It is oftentimes it's literally on fire. Every year there are wildfires that rage out of control, and because of these like awful companies, these power companies and stuff, who are just ridiculous. In Anaheim, which is where Disneyland is located, you don't have these problems, and the reason is because ironically the utilities are public. The power and the water are public utilities, and the reason why is because Disney lobbied for them. Because Disney knew what for-profit companies could do to these things and how it could cripple their theme park.
Yeah, that would make sense. It's like, whoa, guys, we got to make sure that the state's in control of this. We don't want us taking care of this.
Absolutely. So
we'll screw ourselves over.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like
they know.
That's how it'd have to be. It'd have to be the character of Walt staring in the mirror when they're saying, you really want to privatize it? Why can't we just have another private company own it? Or, it's like, and he looks in the mirror, looks at himself, narrows his eyes, goes, no, we can't trust a company to run this. Make sure the government handles it.
One last stupid anecdote about Disney. There's one of the attractions at Disneyland. It's called I'm sorry, it's called the Matterhorn. It's based on the Matterhorn. It's a giant mountain. Walt wanted there to be a Matterhorn in Disneyland, and when you go and you build these big architectural structures, you have to get approval from zoning boards and things. Mm-hmm. And Walt tried to get approval to build this mountain in Disneyland. It would have been the tallest thing to have been built in the Anaheim area. And he was turned down. And the reason is because basically the law said that buildings could only be X height during this era. And the only exception to this rule is sports complexes. Sports complexes, of course, have to be bigger, right? Because basketball courts and stuff like that. So what Walt did is he built a giant mountain in Disneyland, and at the top of the mountain, inside, there is a single hoop basketball court.
There it is.
And so that is the sort of the weird degree of manipulation and control that these people have. They get to do whatever they want. They might have to redefine it, but there's nothing stopping them.
Yeah, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
All right. So digging into iHunt, so we kind of got the themes and the tone, the sort of feeling people might have listening to this talk about how nightmarish this is, being in the iHunt universe. Let's talk about the game. So I know this is coming out, hopefully before the end of December. That's your kind of plan right now. Yeah. And you're not kickstarting it. And no. I was just wondering if you want to kind of, talk about that. Because I know a lot of projects right now, if you're tuned in even the slightest to the tabletop hobby, the Kickstarter is kind of people's bread and butter for these types of projects, right next to Patreon and whatever the generic brands are.
The Indiegogos of the world, yeah. So so there's a couple of big reasons. The first is I've crowdfunded projects before, and I've had good and bad luck with it. One of the problems really comes down to sort of the sense of fan ownership, and the senses of like entitlement and involvement in a project. I want to be able to make the game that I want to make, and I don't really want to be beholden to anyone. And that's really important to me. I also think that right now, the game industry, like you said, if you are into games, you've heard of Kickstarter, you're familiar with it, you've probably kickstarted games or backed Kickstarter games. Mm-hmm. I feel like the whole industry, the whole hobby is sort of beholden to Kickstarter. There are companies, like I've worked for one, Onyx Path, who their entire business model is based on Kickstarter. They do like 12 or more a year.
Yeah, they really exploit those rules.
Yeah, and
they have to keep the press running.
Yeah, and that's what it is, because the Kickstarters, it's all about hype. It's all about keeping hype, and I don't want people to be buying my game because there's a 30-day window. I want them to be buying it because of the quality of the work, the message of the work, and I feel like that sort of like at the register, like last minute shopping attitude that drives Kickstarter is hurtful to the nature of games, because I've seen, like, I have Kickstarter games that I've purchased. I've probably got about 20 like on my shelf right now, and I haven't read most of them. And it's not that I'm not interested in them. It's that I was interested in them in the time, and I was interested in backing the thing or whatever. I was interested in the ramp up and the hype, but then it just, by the time I got it, 2 years whatever later, I was on to the next thing. Like, I didn't care anymore.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of degrees of that too. I have the exact same experience. Like, a few of my favorite games in recent times I kickstarted Legacy Life Among the Ruins for its deluxe, the deluxe leather book, and I really like it. I really love opening and reading it, but I think we've gotten one test game of it out. I kickstarted Fellowship, but it really wasn't a Kickstarter in the same sense because first edition was already out and this was just for more books in the future. I'm like, I definitely want more of those in the future. And
Yeah.
we got a lot of use out of that. So there's a good example of that working out. You know, we got hyped up for it. We got sucked into the hype. We loved it. It was actually good. You know, it wasn't smoke and mirrors or anything. And bam, we played it. And then there's other
Yeah.
things that I'll kickstart and they're obsolete by the time they come out.
Yeah.
Like I guess my most recent example of something I kickstarted that became obsolete was Wraith 20th Anniversary Edition.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I kicked that shortly after kicking Exalted Third Edition, and that was just. And we have episodes about it. Don't. I'm not bringing it up, listeners.
Yeah.
That's a whole thing that our listeners know. But Wraith, I kickstarted it. I got the big, glossy, beautiful, leathery book or whatever because I really liked Wraith. But by the time it came out, which was like a year and a half ago, maybe I think, and that was like
it was about 4 years, 6 years. Yeah, 6 years. 6 years after.
It was like 6 or 7 years. I didn't live in Vancouver when I kickstarted it, and that was at least 6 or 7 years ago.
Wow.
So I have it here, and I'm like, wow. In that amount of time, everything I know about gaming and everything I consider good game design and everything I have nostalgia for has fallen on fire.
Yeah, you're like a different person.
Yeah,
at that point.
like I actively dislike and kind of hate the old World of Darkness now.
Yeah,
I had this sneer on my face reading through Wraith, being like, "Oh no, there's target numbers. Oh, they have a there's a gear list." Slight tangent: Wraith 20th Anniversary Edition is the only book in Old WoD we can find with grenade rules.
Oh my God.
So like, yeah, and that's a statement if you know anything about Wraith at all.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we were running Exalted versus World of Darkness. It's something that Holden made a little while ago, and I'm like, oh, your Exalts and your Solars, and you have an Armory, and someone took that skill you can take in Old World of Darkness called Armory or Weapons Cache. And I'm like, well, clearly Vampire will have the weapons we seek. No. Well, clearly Mage will have grenades. No. Hunter? Not really. I don't remember finding any. But Wraith has it.
Yeah.
It's just so bizarre. But that's the thing. Like, I backed Wraith. I was really into Wraith. I really loved it. I wanted it as a piece. You know what I did when I got the book? I got this big leather book. And I didn't think it looked very nice, so I took a dry brush and put some gunmetal paint on it and dried it out. And I dry brushed the cover to give it more depth and more texture.
Huh.
And it's supposed to be like a collector's item. I'm like, I'm going to paint this. I'll like it more if I paint it.
There's a I worked for Onyx Path and White Wolf and CCP for years and years and years. I got about 3 million words in publication with them. I was one of their more prolific people.
Yeah, you're on almost every book I see when I look through the old archives.
Yeah, and so one of the things that I remember like sort of butting heads with was when I was talking about how we needed to sort of like bake a couple of ideas a little bit better. We needed to work on a couple of things from a game design perspective, how we needed to test a couple of ideas with the public, and we needed a little bit more time on the front end before we start writing to revise these things. One of the things that I remember being told by Rich Thomas, the CEO of Onyx Path, or the owner of Onyx Path, he said that basically we're not going to do this because we're not really making books for people who read and play games. We're making books for people who collect books.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Like, take away any maliciousness or malfeasance from Tricky Dicky, and that's absolutely true for Onyx Path. They make collector's items. Yeah, and that's and collector's items. Sorry to cut you off there, but collector's items specifically based in nostalgia from 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's when I first heard that. Like my initial response was really negative. Like I was really taken aback by that, and I really felt that was a cynical approach. With time, I started to realize, okay, so no, that's what they're doing. It is what it is, and at least they're honest about that. Like internally, they're honest about that. But I feel like that's Kickstarter culture in a lot of ways. Like I know that there are a lot of cool things that come out of it, and I've used it and stuff too. But I feel like it is for people who collect things, not necessarily the with the intent to play. And I really want to make games to make people play.
Yeah, it's FOMO. Kickstarter, is designed to prey on FOMO.
Yeah.
Which, for listeners, fear of missing out, FOMO.
Exactly, and that's what drives it.
It's why I backed Legacy for the nice hardcover edition. I didn't know if I'd be able to get it afterwards. It's why I originally backed Exalted for the nice edition cover before I got a refund. I didn't know if I'd be able to get the nice edition.
Yeah.
Same with Wraith.
And
the majority of Kickstarters are that. Like a game I really liked to play was Godbound by Kevin Crawford, and his Kickstarter, if you backed it at the highest tier, not only gave you the book, all the things to play the game, it gave you the InDesign files so you could edit your own book if you wanted, and free license in perpetuity to share the book with anyone you want forever. Because you backed it so high, he doesn't care. It's not piracy if you do it. You just give it out to whoever you want. You bought that, right? And it's like, wow, I can never get that again. FOMO. And I started making the rat dispense the drugs.
And I feel like there's something cynical, and there's something a little bit predatory, and there's just something in there that I don't want that to be the association with my game. This is a game about the gig economy. This is a game about like the problems with capitalism, and of course, there's no ethical consumption or whatever. But I feel like I feel like it would be deceptive almost to present this game in that style.
It'd be almost a little on the nose.
Yeah, it would be definitely on the nose.
Yeah, to put it on the giant Skinner box.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Peter, in text, in silence, always in silence, brought up a very good point. If we cannot get this from Kickstarter, where should we be looking out for it?
Okay, so there's basically going to be two options to get it whenever it comes out. There's going to be, digitally speaking, you'll be able to get it on Itch.io, which is my new favorite store for digital products.
Itch is great. I really
love
like it.
Yeah, since I've started selling games on there, I think I've made about 3 times as much on average as I do selling the same games on Drive-Thru.
Yeah, Drive-Thru's definitely
to evangelize. Yeah, it's like you tell them you tell the people this is the base amounts of the game, and then this is how much I would think that it is worth. This is how much I would like to be paid for it. So I'll put up a novel for $5, and then when the person purchases it, they get a pop-up that says, the creator thinks that this book is worth $7. So how much are you going to pay them? You can pay $5. That's okay. And most of the time when I do that, I'll say, okay, this is $5 minimum, $7 recommended. People will pay me $10.
Yeah.
And it's awesome.
Yeah.
It's so nice. And then on Drive-Thru, whenever I sell things on Drive-Thru, I have to either choose to put it up for $5 and just settle for $5, or I put it up for $7. And a lot of people on Drive-Thru don't buy things if they're more than a couple of dollars, or they wait until ridiculous sales until it's like 70% off. So at that point, I put it up for $5. I'll be selling it for $2.
Yeah. Honestly, Drive-Thru, I haven't used Drive-Thru in maybe a decade for the purpose of finding something new. I don't think I've
never found anything new on it. I don't think.
Like to be perfectly candid, I'll go to Drive-Thru RPG to buy a book after I've pirated it. Like if I just got a tabletop book, like new supplement this or that, and I have it and I've been using it, I'm like, it's time to buy this. It's time to give the creator money. It's like, find their Drive-Thru, buy it. It's just a night and day experience. It's like, oh man, there's all these, what would be the term for like small little quickly cooked up RPGs that are testing things? Ash cans, I think is the the new hip lingo the awake children are using.
It's ash cans or zines.
But like there's all these little things you can find and buy up and like test out and look at and give feedback on. It's almost like Itch is turning into its own little like community for creating RPGs and also as a storefront. Yeah.
It's like it's like all the positive parts of the old like Steam Greenlight for video games.
The before time.
Yeah, except it's doing it in a positive way, and it's got this nice little internal built-in community. And also in Itch, you get to choose how much the Itch cut is. The default is like 10%, whereas with Drive-Thru, it's either 30% or it's 25 or 30. No, 30 or 35, I think. I can't remember. It's been a while. I think it's 30 and 35. It's 30 if you're exclusive and 35 if you're not exclusive. So you're only making like 65% of the MSRP, the retail price. Whereas on itch you're making 90%.
Yeah,
and you're making more to begin with.
And honestly, that's gotta be that's something that's definitely going to be changing soon, because drive-thru was able to get away with that when they were the only shop in town. Their software is like 20 years out of date.
It is.
And
it is.
And their algorithms are real messed up. Like, there's certain companies that always seem to be best-selling, and there's certain companies that are like 30 years old that always seem to be best-selling in the new up-and-coming indie category.
Yeah.
There's definitely something wrong with the site, but Itch is a brand new website. It has a much more friendly interface, and it's giving creators, like, as much of the profits as basically they can get away with giving them.
Absolutely, which is awesome. So the other way will probably be drive-through. I'll be able to there, and also physically, because they have a print-on-demand service. I'm going to be looking at other print-on-demand services too. Like, I have a couple lined up, but basically it comes down to like costs and stuff, because print on demand is a nightmare, especially with colored books.
Especially in this climate.
With shipping. Oh my god.
Every country in the world is at war with itself now, and shipping is one of the things that's happening. You should listen to the board game community. They are looking for blood.
Oh my god, I can only imagine, because shipping a book right now usually costs more than the book. And a board game, god damn, that has to be like shipping a car.
You have to get the parts made. You got to get them sent. You got to contact the right printing place. Apparently, a lot of them went out of China and like that area of production, and it's not viable anymore.
Yeah,
it turns out outsourcing to slave labor isn't viable.
No. Slave labor is becoming less viable, and unfortunately, in this case, it's a bad thing. Like, it's such a oh my god, it's such a quagmire. But with drive-through, the one benefit that they have with their print-on-demand service is that they're through Ingram, which is one of the biggest printers in the world, and they print like in a few different locations in Europe and in I don't even know. They print in a few. Now they print in Brazil.
I think I heard they have a printer in Australia or New Zealand now. Like I think the people they source from it's getting big. That's the real strength of TTRPG, the network for print on demand.
Yeah, but ironically, that print-on-demand service, you can just do it through Ingram, and you actually make more money if you do it through Ingram. The only drawback is that there's a slight upfront cost. I think it's like $100, but if you intend on selling more than a couple copies, it's actually cheaper that way. Yeah,
plus you get to use Ingram's customer support, which is an actual paid customer support team.
Yep, and they sell through Amazon.
Yeah, they're an actual company, so they have people paid money to make you happy.
It's so there's that. So I don't know. I'll probably be selling physical through drive-through just because it's ubiquitous as far as print on demand goes. But I'm going to be looking at some other options. But basically, it's going to be itch for digital, drive-through for physical.
It's really exciting how it's like a meta commentary on iHunt itself, where you're trying to find the ways to sell it that are the least awful.
Yeah.
In a book about trying to find the least awful things to enjoy.
Yeah.
It's like murder's pretty bad, but killing monsters is pretty okay, morally speaking.
I mean, if we've got to murder people, at least we can go with the ones with bangs.
Look, we've been doing this for... Okay, you take that back about bangs for one thing. Let's not even start on bangs. Look, we've been humans for quite a while now, and we figured out that a certain amount of us are going to be murdered. So why don't we... Or are going to murder. So let's just put those on the ones that turn into giant doggos.
Yeah. And besides, like, you can argue that for every vampire you kill, they were probably going to kill at least one or two people in the future, probably more.
It's just like that.
So you're actually doing good.
It's just like that famous Disney character, Jason Todd. If you kill more than one murderer, you come out at a net positive.
Yeah.
All right. So, now that we've talked about how to buy it and what's it about, let's move on to how to play it. What are we doing with iHunt? How does this work? I assume it's going to be a D20 game, as all RPGs are.
Yeah, it's actually going to be a 5th edition D&D mod.
That makes sense. That's the only RPG that there is.
That's a joke because it's going to be 4th edition.
I mean, we're looking to run 4th edition just to try it out because we've never played D&D in like 10 years. So we don't know what it's like anymore.
But no, the game is going to be based on Fate. It's going to be based on Fate Core. it's going to have some pretty major modifications from Fate while still being compatible and basically faithful to the core Fate core experience. It's going to be heavily gig based. Like it's going to be episodic. So the structure is going to be like a TV show. It's all going to be based on seasons and episodes with minor arcs. If you are familiar with Fate, it's out there. It uses
sorry, but back of the new Fate core print, Fate,
yeah,
it's out there. Olivia Hill 2019.
Yeah, Fred needs to get on using that. Right now.
Fred Hicks prints it right on the back of the book. Fate, it's out there.
So it uses fudge dice. It uses 4 dice that have plus and minuses, and they basically assume a default of 0, and you get up to a -4 +4, and that's the very basic mechanic. You add a skill to it, and you're going for a target number. You either succeed, you fail, or you succeed with a cost.
Pretty simple. It is. Thank God.
Yeah, pretty simple, straightforward stuff. If you fail, you get like what's called a boost, which means that you're failing forward. You're getting an advantage in the future. That's tried and true. It's tested. It's not necessarily revolutionary fun, and it uses what are called fate points, which are narrative points. They let you declare things in the scene or get a little bonus in post. So you get a shitty roll. You're like, I'm going to drop a fate point. I'm going to use an aspect. Aspects are the sort of defining feature of Fate, where they're epithets about your character that are double-sided. They can be used as a positive or a negative, and you can use a fate point to add a little bit to your roll if an aspect applies. And then the other side of aspects is they can be compelled, which is to say that they, if it would be a hindrance in your character's life, if it would cause you problems, you can compel it, deal with that problem, and take a fate point. So that's the whole game is about managing the fate point economy and the flow of those fate points back and forth.
Yeah.
So that's the primer on Fate as a basic game. Now the difference with iHunt is we have a couple of big differences, and the first is what we call the edge die. iHunt specifically is a story about power differentials and power dynamics. The raw story, the very basics of it, is about how capitalism is this insurmountable force that's always against you. It's always oppressive, and it always has the edge at the outset. iHunters are clever people. Millennials are clever people who have to fight and struggle to sort of seize the edge back. Now, what this means in play is that one of those dice, those plus minus neutral fudge dice, they get replaced with a 6-sided die. So that can never be negative, and it can, instead of going from -1 to 1, it goes from 1 to 6. So this fundamentally changes the numerical dynamic of the game. And one side typically has the edge. In iHunt, the monster by default has the edge. If all things are the same, if you're 2 people in a white room, the monster wins. Mm-hmm. iHunters have to fight clever. iHunters use traps, they use tricks, they use ambushes, they use whatever they can in order to make the fight unfair, but for them. And so a lot of the mechanics are predicated on making for sure you're prepped, making for sure that you are using those shots, making for sure you're using traps and tricks and research montages and whatever you can. To sort of steal the edge from the monsters. That way, whenever the fight comes, it's less of an issue of will I win. It's by that point it should already be determined. It's like an old samurai movie, well, like a Kurosawa flick or something, where you have two samurai that meet in battle and they're eyeing each other up and they're playing out in each other's heads. And they know like this person mastered this style, so they're going to do this, 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 and this. But I am a master of this style, so I'm going to do this, 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 and this. And you can tell probably by the time that swords clash who is going to win, because it's already been decided.
Yeah,
that's not the
drama.
ahead of time. Yeah, and so typically in iHunt, it comes down to making for sure that you have the edge. And if you have the edge, you're exploiting a power differential, and like people who exploit power differentials, you tend to win. Mm-hmm. So that's the basics of the sort of the power dynamic. Also in iHunt, there's a third thing that you can do, or I guess a fourth thing that you can do with aspects. Aspects, you can get a bonus by invoking them. You can compel them, like I was just saying a moment ago. You can also make a thing in the scene, like you can be like, oh, there's my friend Jim. He is a guy and he knows me and owes me one. That's a fate point. The fourth thing that you can do in iHunt is, under certain circumstances, you can imperil an aspect, which is, instead of telling a person, okay, you have to deal with this problem, imperiling an aspect forces them into a hard choice where they have to choose between two undesirable outcomes. You put them between a rock and a hard place. And in iHunt, oftentimes this means that you have put yourself in a position where your enemy has to make a choice to either die or give up and get the fuck away. Slight spoiler for the second iHunt book, but there's a scene where one of the monsters impales the main character Lana on a sword, and she knew this was going to happen, basically. Like, she kind of expected this, and she knew that this is one of those things that will probably kill her. But she uses a trick. The person who impales her is a vampire, and she knows that the vampire blood can heal her. So while impaled, she grabs onto the vampire and starts drinking from them. And she knows that the vampire will go hungry and die if she doesn't run away. So basically, the vampire has two choices. I can kill her and I can die, or I can let her go, let her heal, and run.
That actually comes in the first book too, yeah.
Yeah. There's a couple of instances of that sort of thing, but the idea is that a good iHunter can, for one, recognize that sometimes you have to put yourself in danger because there's no safe fight, there's no safe murder. But also that making someone make that choice is very hard. Now, this is a double-sided coin. The hunters can do this. The hunters can force a hard choice, or the GM, the director, can force a hard choice on every player once per turn, or once per game. The hard choice that they make, though, the hard choice that the director puts on them, is not a choice predicated on the monster. When the director makes the players make that hard choice, it has to be predicated on the sort of the mounting problems with the world, the capitalist issues, the poverty issues, the social issues that iHunters deal with. So this is a tool that the hunters can use to gain an advantage on the monsters, but the director has to use it to not gain an advantage, but to enforce the inequity of the world.
That's actually really good, because that means then the players are always looking for ways to play out the supernatural side, right? And
yes.
The director is always looking for ways to go, hey, remember how Walmart's a nightmare and unions are good?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh.
Yeah, exactly.
That actually keeps a really nice balance with we had this kind of, not problem, but this kind of goal in our Exalted versus WoD game where the Exalts were all teenagers in high school in the 80s. So it's like they naturally want to do demigod stuff, but we, the players, naturally want to see high school drama. So find out how to incentivize the two so they both, show up and complement each other.
Yeah. Well, like I said about the basic theme of the game is, or the stories, the world, is that it's horror where eviction is scarier than the monster. So you might have a situation where the hunters are killing this, ancient vampire lord who's come to buy up beachfront property or whatever. And they exploit a situation and they set up a trap where the vampire has to make a choice between either dying themselves or losing their entire vampire family. Either way, it sucks. But the vampire has to make that choice because you put them in that situation and you've imperiled them. The vampire gets killed and you get, $5,000. Awesome. Yay. That gets transferred into your account. But however, you get home that night and the director imperils one of your aspects and says, okay, so that $5,000 is in your account, but it's triggered a flag on your account because it was suspicious activity. Your account is locked down. And you have a shutoff notice for your electric and a shutoff notice for your phone bill. Which one gets turned off?
Oh my God, that's so grim. I was going to go light and say your babysitter was irresponsible and took your kid to Fire Festival. But yours was so dark and so real.
so that's how you use that's how we use fate to enforce the themes of iHunt.
It's actually, I can see it. That seems like a really good loop.
Yeah.
All right. What are there any other changes you made to fate?
We've got a couple of minor ones, like we slightly modify the way like stress and consequence, but it's not super substantial. Most of what we've done is add onto fate instead of changing it. Like there's a whole system for generating jobs. There's a chapter. If how have you managed to
like kind of highlight episodic play and make it more natural?
Well, the idea would be that the game should probably be closer to a Monster of the Week style thing, like a Buffy the Vampire Slayer thing, and the jobs themselves are you can of course make them, like if you want to as a group you can just make them up, but there will be charts in the book that you can use to generate jobs, and that way it feels more like swiping through a random app and you've got all of this weird shit coming at you. If you've ever played Leverage, there's a similar system for job creation in there. And in this situation, you are generating these random monsters and these random scenarios, these random marks, etc. And so it's going to feel a little bit more episodic. Also, because of the imperiling of the aspects, because of the the oppressive weight of capitalism, whatever, you're expected to not necessarily have a zero-sum story, but you are expected that gains will be met with losses, and so the characters can never really get, like, they can get ahead sometimes, but they can never overcome the fundamental problems with the world. You can't just end capitalism by killing some werewolves.
No, that attitude.
And because of because of the loop where you come home and there's a flag on your account or whatever, there's always problems. It's always expensive to be poor, and there are always unexpected problems. There are always unexpected consequences for living as a working poor person. So that's going to make for sure that the story stays grounded, and you don't run into what other games would call like power creep or whatever.
Yeah, the idea that eventually you play for so long that you stop being people and just start being adventurers. Like, that's not even a bad thing. That's just something that happens with games when people engage in the collaborative hallucination thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's actually, sorry to derail, but it's actually something you see a lot in fanfics. That guy, Dan Olson, Foldable Human, he did the review of the Twilight novels, right? And he then reviewed 50 Shades. And as everyone knows, 50 Shades is the fanfic of Twilight with the serial numbers badly filed off. And it's really specific, but he goes into specific talk about fanfic communities and about how most fanfics have this existential crisis problem when they go too far away from the source material, because the source material was bonding everything together, the assumption that it was there. So once it gets a little too crazy, and an example that people might use would be, 50 Shades and how he's a billionaire, so that immediately starts unspooling people from being normal human beings, shockingly enough, because the Bella character basically has no wants or danger anymore in her life except for incels, apparently. But that happens with other fanfics, like those very specific, like, power fantasy ones, like, you know what I mean, Methods of Rationality. As soon as they leave the framework of the thing they're ficking, then it just becomes like a power fantasy adventure, and like all the stakes fall out of the bottom.
Well, the iHunt has an inherent control for that in the world, and I guess in the mechanics too. But in the world, Lana, there's a couple of situations where she decides to essentially become an adventurer. When you decide to become an adventurer in iHunt, that basically means quitting your day job and going iHunt full time.
Mm-hmm.
This is like quitting your day job and going Uber full time. It sounds nice, and you tell yourself, "Oh, okay, well, if I do this, and this many hours, etc., then I can make it." You quit your day job, you start doing Uber full time, and then you realize, "Oh, wait, this money isn't as reliable as I thought it was. There are unexpected expenses. The first time I have, an issue with my car or whatever, it stops being tenable, and then I have to go back to the day job." With iHunt, there's always going to be problems. There's always, like, the contracts are not always there. They don't always pay. Sometimes you can have clients who will not pay you the full amount, or they'll leave you a bad review and you get suspended.
They'll burn your account.
They can burn your account. There's a million bad things that can happen. And so you can go and you can become a full-time adventurer. You can hit that level of power creep, but that level of achievement in iHunt is not desirable because it's unreliable. Lana, at the beginning of iHunt, she acknowledges when she does her iHunt contracts, she typically makes more in a day than she makes in a week working for the theme park. Mm-hmm. But she knows that every Friday she gets a paycheck from the theme park. She can't rely on that with iHunt because she doesn't know when the contracts are going to come in and when the pay is going to come in.
Yeah, and like that's really obvious anywhere. Like I know every person I know from just above, just below, and at my age group has had that math play out in their head where they're like, okay, I got to stay with this part-time. I have this job right now, and I have an opportunity to move to a different job, but that job is less regular. I don't know if I'd be able to pay bills. Rent won't come in. It'll be a risk. I might be, if this doesn't work out right, there's a 50-50 chance I'll be in poverty. That's just a universal thing everyone I know has had to go through.
Yeah. And so you have to, and that's the sort of the core loop in iHunt. It's weighing risk with reward in the way that you might in a game, but it's your life. And since it's presented in iHunt as your life, the stakes are higher. It's not like it's not like a game like D&D or whatever where you can just take that risk and it's all about escapism. In iHunt, if you choose to go full time, that's dangerous in a way that you're not used to. So that's basically how it manages scope creep.
Neat. All right, that sounds actually really engaging for that then, because like that's something we encounter a lot in our games. Trying to we have a thing we want to explore, but mechanics just aren't enforcing the loop.
Yeah.
It's a lot of that has to do with like when we look at older games too, like games that come from even 5 or 6 years ago have this problem.
Yeah.
Like to give an example, World of Darkness has this problem in spades all over the place. Nothing about Vampire the Masquerade makes it Vampire the Masquerade. There's a reason people played trench coat and katana superheroes.
Yeah.
The game makes you do it. The game tells you to do it. The game's like, do it.
Yeah.
It's so goddamn fun. Yeah, every part of the game's like, it is so fucking fun to have a trench coat and katana and to use gasoline and styrofoam to set your enemies on fire.
Absolutely.
Here are rules for it.
We one of the other like things, I don't want to say it's a minor thing that we've added on Fate, but it's a minor the big deal in Fate is that money is fickle, right? Mm-hmm. What something costs to a poor person and what something costs to a wealthy person or even a comfortable person is significantly different. This is a thing that we acknowledge in the book, and I think that pretty much everyone can acknowledge that it's a thing that's true. Yeah. If not, then maybe iHunt's not for you. But
you can be pretty confident, Olivia, that every single goddamn person who buys your book has had someone on Reddit shove that Sam Vines quote from Discworld down their throat.
Yeah, I actually have that in the book. I quote that in the book for that reason.
I've checked. I have not gone a day since 2018 where that has not shown up somewhere in my life every day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Reddit,
absolutely.
Twitter, Imager, Tumblr, it doesn't matter. It'll be there staring me in the face.
Yeah, and
It's
it's something that
saturated.
the lesson of. So in a lot of games, and you have your rewards. In D&D is, of course, it's pronounced you have gold, and you get money. In iHunt, we don't measure things like cash directly because it's subjective. Because it doesn't mean the same thing to two different people. Comfort and wealth and that sort of thing. There's such mutable ideas, and the thing that we acknowledge in iHunt is that you're playing essentially working poor people, so and millennials, and so instead of focusing on the rewards there, our advancement system, our experience system, if you will, is based on what we call selfies, which are experiences. And selfies in the sense of these sort of play milestones, these things that have happened in your character's life, they're events and they're experiences that can't be taken away from you. Money can always be taken away, but that time that we went to the beach, that can never be taken away from us.
God damn, that's dark.
But it is and it isn't. Because it is a thing that you will always have. And so you have these points, and instead of just spending them like experience points or whatever, you can increase your character with them. You can basically tag them and increase your character. But these experiences set on your character as what we call a scrapbook, which we encourage people to do full out scrapbooks, add pictures to their character sheets, doodles, fun borders and stuff. There's a whole system for it. It's really cute. But you have these selfies and you can tag them later on in order to get an advantage in play. And it works. It operates the way that you would have like a callback in a TV show where the character would mention or recognize something that happened in the past of the series. And that gives them an advantage now.
Okay.
So the time that we were at the beach, we had that romantic moment and then a mermaid attacked. I remember that you were in the swim team and the mermaid dragged you under and you were able to hold your breath for like a minute and a half. It was really, really impressive. And so when the werewolf uses this noxious gas attack, I know you can hold your breath because I have this selfie, this experience that can't be taken away from me. I tag it, you get an advantage on that roll.
Nice.
Yeah.
So
it's all about experiences.
The experience thing, that's a really good nerve to hit, because that's something that, again, just talking from my personal experience, that's something I see a lot. People are like, you hear a lot of people that are like, yeah, I've given up on the idea that I'll ever get out of debt or get out of being poor. So why not just enjoy it? Find the little moments, the little things.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's so dark. That's so silent generation-y.
Yeah, it is. It's dark, but then it's also cool to be able to divest from capital.
Yeah.
To be able to say, okay, this sucks, but it doesn't define me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a form of rebellion. And we talk about games like in the games in the 90s, World of Darkness and stuff. We talk about rebellion and we talk about punk, and ultimately a lot of it was aesthetic, and it was ultimately doing the same things but doing them a little bit brasher.
Using the F word in a source book.
Yeah, you didn't want to abolish the system of city leadership and princes. You didn't want to topple the king in your D&D game. But you were a punk. You wanted to essentially seize and take that. You wanted that to be a part of your reward system. But we don't let that be a part of the reward system. We eschew it entirely. We use a different value system than capital gives us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds really engaging. Like that. That's such a great way to sidestep the issue. Like to totally. Yeah. Well, not even sidestep. I guess that's kind of a poor way to say it. I guess that's a really great way to confront it and subvert it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I've had a couple of people ask, so what? An iHunter saves a lot of money. Did they just buy themselves out of poverty? No, because money is temporary. money is a trap. Money is something that like Biggie said, "More money, more problems." Right? And if you have that money, something will take it away from you. if you're not a privileged person, being a privileged person isn't something that you can subvert by having money. It's something that you subvert by class. Class is not fixed by simply having money.
Yeah, having money doesn't fix it. Having wealth fixes it.
Yes, there you go. It's having the wealth that solves that. It's transcending class. And you can't just transcend class by working hard. That is a myth that is sold to us. And in iHunt, instead of trying to beat people over the head with that as the central conceit, we just don't acknowledge that as a thing that you can do. We never embrace capitalism as a realism in our world. We never tell people, oh, yeah, it's hard, but you are the people with merit. You are the meritocracy. You work hard and you will succeed, and we will cheerlead you and you'll win because games. In iHunt, you don't win by getting more money because that shouldn't be the win condition.
Mm-hmm. And it just factually isn't.
It isn't.
Like it just does not help. People who get a groundswell often have people who get a groundswell who are in working class poverty. The groundswell goes to pay for things they just weren't able to possibly even handle at the time. So it's like the, I don't have a good metaphor for it because it's hard to articulate, but it's like you're living your whole life digging out of a pit, right? And the pit's something you got a handle on. Like it fills in a bit every day, but you got a handle on it. And a groundswell of money just lets the camera pull back to realize that the pit is just the highest point of a much larger graveyard. And it's like, okay, now you have to dig all this out. By the way, the graveyard stays the same size after the groundswell goes away.
We know this is the fact. Like we've seen it with things like people winning lotteries and stuff like that.
Well documented.
Either destroys their life, or they end up living the same lifestyle but basically helping their friends not die so much.
Yeah, it's the two extremes where they basically party themselves to death because YOLO, and really, why wouldn't you? And now instead of me and three other people constantly sending each other tips through PayPal, passing the same $5 around, and we all know each other's dead name, as the famous quote goes. Now it's me and 10,000 people I'm passing the money around.
Yeah, well, like
hermit shell crabs.
When I was a kid, I was always by people who are like, well, if I win the lottery, I'll buy a private island. And now all of my friends and all of the people around me are like, if I won the lottery, I would buy off everyone's medical GoFundMe.
Right? Exactly. That's the first thing I thought of too. Like, think of all the GoFundMes I could sponsor.
Yeah.
Dark.
So yeah, that's how we enforce the world. That's how we make it scary using fate. And that's how we sort of de-incentivize the things that we would classically consider, points of achievement in games.
That seems all shockingly coherent and like nailed together and lean. Like that seems to be just a well-oiled machine of a concept. And yeah, it feeds into itself really well, just as an outsider looking in. The Uber economy, monsters literally using vampires and also making capitalism the villain. Vampires famously having been invented only recently when Karl Marx called vampires in to talk about rich people and classism.
Yep.
The whole thing feeds into itself. So that's all really good. So obviously characters are doing these runs and there's a system in place to generate them and to kind of make them the focal point for the session when they're not dealing with their personal lives, right?
Yeah.
And that's sort of the core hook of the game, you'd say, like what the loop is, what people are doing, what it's about.
Yeah.
Is there anything about that you want to add on or anything you want to elaborate on?
I think that really the sort of the heart of it, the focus is like we see in a lot of this media that it was sort of inspired by your Buffys and your Supernaturals.
That's literally my next question, the pop culture side, getting into the inspirations.
Well, good. The in those shows, there's this thing that really frustrates me a lot of times. I like that stuff. Like I loved Buffy growing up, and I loved Supernatural for at least like 5 seasons or so. But there's a thing that really frustrates me with them, and it's like in Buffy gets a job like doing fast food. I think like
I love that episode.
Yeah, so there's that, and then like in Supernatural, in the first few episodes, there's this fucking part that really they forge identities.
Mm-hmm.
They collect forged identities and basically skimmed and stolen credit cards and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
And that to me is fucking awesome. That's stuff that my mom did growing up. Like, that's stuff that really, really resonates with me. But then both of those shows just drop that.
Yeah.
The stakes for Buffy having that job, like, it's awesome. God, this working person, this is like me. And then the stakes are really meaningless and temporary. You never really get a feel that these people really feel the weight of their class. The Sam and Dean in Supernatural, they do all of this stuff at the beginning, but very quickly it becomes such a thing of scope and scale where, oh no, they're saving the world today. They don't have time to steal credit cards, and who knows where they get their fucking money for their pies or whatever. It doesn't matter.
There's literally an episode that opens with a bunch of hunters shotgunning them in the face, and God just brings them back. It's like, what? You're not gonna die. 15 seasons in a movie.
It's really ridiculous, and like, if people are into that, that's cool. But I love those moments. Those moments, the promise of those moments is amazing to me.
Yeah,
but then it always falls flat. It always falls flat. It always sort of fails to deliver on that promise. And iHunt is that promise. iHunt is what those moments tell me that the story is going to deliver, and then it just runs with that. That's the focus. We're never really concerned about whether or not the characters in iHunt in the iHunt books, we never really wonder, is Lana going to kill this thing? Of course Lana's going to kill this thing. She's awesome. She's going to kick its ass. She's going to kill it. We want to see how she does it, but really that's not what the story is about. It's not about the stakes of whether or not she can do that thing. It's whether or not she can navigate this awful situation.
It's really what stuck out to me about the first book so far, where every single encounter she has with a vampire is transactional.
Yeah.
Every single time she tries to hunt a vampire, it costs some goddamn amount of her cut. Like, this is right after she sleeps with Denny, or like right around there. So this is when she's hunting Redhead Vampire, who I suspect I suspect from how Redhead is written is not going to go down like some nameless vampire. Like, this is a character that has more going on with it, or is going to show up more, or might even be a character.
Oh my God! Spoiler alert! You've got good instincts.
It's just how she's written. She just seems to be like she'll be a person instead of like a big jacked redneck in a mega hat.
She delivers my single favorite moment in the series. She is involved in my favorite series. And you'll find out about that eventually. But yeah, she is a character.
Yeah. So I've lost my train of thought completely just talking about her. I've lost it completely. We were talking about Sam and Dean and how natural they seemed in the beginning. We were talking about iHunt fulfills the promise. We were talking about everything's transactional. There it is. The living vampire that is capitalism. Got it. I'm back on track. So yeah, everything Lana does dealing with vampires is transactional. Like when she's hunting the redhead and those other vampires she's hunting, it's like she's going to get 10 grand for killing this vampire. Well, now it's going to be 9 grand because she got a tip from a tip guy because she has to work her regular job and she can't actually afford to do basic legwork. But there's a guy who does basic legwork and sells it for a cut of the profits. Obviously there would be. That just makes sense. So it's like, all right, well, that's going to cost a bit of money. All right, whatever. And it's like, okay, well, someone saw her hunt a vampire early on, so that's going to cut like half of it off. It's like, oh my God.
Yep.
Or later on where she gets, injuries and has to get goddamn medical attention from an Uber for doctors that are unlicensed. Who like actually care, who you've written the Uber for unlicensed doctors and vets to be the real heart and soul of the entire goddamn show.
Yeah.
Like you've made the one doctor character. Like I would watch a CSI procedural about her.
Oh my God! She needs a story, really.
Driving around and like I'm gonna just assume a red Volkswagen Beetle delivering blood and I don't know, let's say meth to people who need it.
I don't know what she would drive if the story were set in like say 2006. She would have one of those really gaudy sort of retro throwback cars like the PT Cruiser.
Oh lordy! Those things are just designed to eat budget.
Yeah. She would have bought that thinking, this is a really cool thing. It's not too expensive, but it looks cool and it gives me sort of an individual presentation. And that would have been like one of her comforts in life.
Yeah.
I don't know what she'd drive now.
Those metal eyelashes on the head beams.
Oh my God.
But yeah, that's the real thing that kind of struck up, is how transactional the entire world seems to be. Like, just hunting a monster is cutting in. Like, there's this golden payout at the end where it's like, I'm going to make $25,000. That's game changing to have it all at once. And it's like, yeah, but you're not. Not at the end of it. You know what does this in a way, and it really shocked me? The new Titans show.
Is that what is that, the DC cartoon?
It's not a cartoon, it's live action. It's not Teen Titans.
Oh, it's live action.
It's just Titans, and they're adults, and it's grim, and it's not the Arrowverse, so it's also not a joke.
I don't think I've even heard of it.
No one has. There's 2 seasons. No one has heard of it.
Looked at me,
There's
my
2 seasons.
My wife, and she's like, "Oh, it looks good."
There's 2 seasons of it, and the trailers are awful, but the actual show is shocking and astounding. Like, I hate having to be, hey, this comic book thing's really good, because the bar's so low. But I don't know if we were just super high watching it or whatnot, but it really has good writing and pacing. It's the same show that spun off to make Doom Patrol, which was actually good.
Yeah, that's cool.
But in that, they actually show you what being a superhero is like for regular people, and it's iHunt. Like, they show the hero, if you know them, and I don't, because I don't follow comics like this, but Hawk and Dove, just a man and a woman who are pretty in shape, who wear a hawk and a dove costume, and they've been doing this for like 5-10 years. And the opening episode for them is after they get back from getting the shit kicked out of them, beating up some gun sellers. The guy who got the worst of it is in a tub to take down the inflammation. And Dove comes in, opens up the medicine cabinet, starts injecting his calf muscles to like deal with like his knees. He needs to get a new hip. They're stitching each other up. They don't go to doctors. What, are you fucking crazy? And like they hang out with Robin. They hang out with Bruce Wayne in the past. Apparently, Bruce and them, used to talk and stuff. And Robin comes from money, because Bruce Wayne's a billionaire. So that dynamic actually comes into play in the episode, and it's shocking. It's just, I'm like, oh wow, this is like actual, like someone sat down and said, hey, what would grown adults who do this every night look like? It's like, oh, they look like football players. Their bodies would be riddled with defects and damage and problems.
Yeah, imagine the superhero retirement plan.
Well, it comes up.
You think your back problems are bad?
That actually comes up, where it's like they're looking to do one more shadow run, because their big thing is taking out these gun distributors, but it's treated like a shadow run. This is their last big run. It won't make them a lot of money. I don't think it'll make them any money, because I don't think superheroes make money that way. But once they're done, that's their out, and they can retire to like Ohio, where the housing's good.
Oh my God!
Like on an old foreclosed farm that's like $50.
Oh,
that's their dream. Or like go to Detroit and buy out some like housing that's condemned. It's like, this is where we'll live.
The idea of a person whose dream is not having to pay rent immensely resonates with me.
Yeah, so I don't know, if I'm plugging that, I guess give it a try. It's a lot better than you'd think it'd be, and it does the iHunt thing where everything's transactional. That just them getting to fight with goons is going to cost them something. So yeah, everything in that show, much like an iHunt, is transactional. Being a superhero, fighting mooks, doing that stuff has a cost, and that cost is killing them. And it seems to be something, if I were to talk and ramble on a bit longer, that people are becoming more aware of. The idea that we're not all 16 and have bones made of rubber that will always bounce back. It seems like the demographics, even though comics have been around for like 85 years or some goddamn long Methuselah number, Batman's so old, it seems just now people are getting into the idea of, oh yeah, we're gonna die one day. Not in the Superman flying into the sun to save the world, in that, one day you're gonna like trip and fall and hit your head in the pavement and go into a coma.
Yeah.
So be good, for goodness sake.
I had a little argument on Twitter yesterday. If you might be shocked if you know me that I got into an argument. But I got into an argument on Twitter with someone. I was saying that I think that there's this meme, the Spider-Man comic with the fucking pterodactyl guy.
Oh my god, yes. Let's talk
Where
about
he's like,
let's talk about that. I know what you're talking about.
yeah, where the character's like, yeah, or where Peter Parker, Spider-Man is like, you could cure cancer with this technology or whatever, and then he's like, but I don't want to cure cancer. I want to turn people into dinosaurs, which awesome.
It's the best. It's the only characterization that ever needs to exist in the human canon. Like, fuck the Epic of Gilgamesh. Send that one panel on the next Voyager probe and say, good game. That's all we needed.
I think that it's amazing. It's like this. It's really funny on its surface, but I think the most interesting thing though about it, and I was talking about this on Twitter, is that what it says about Spider-Man.
Yep.
Because Spider-Man, if you are unaware, in the first issue of the comic, he gets his spider powers and he decides to make spiderweb. The thing that he swings around, the thing that he's most known for, is not actually a superpower. He makes it by going to his school science lab after hours. His teacher lets him hang out because he's a good little kid, and he goes and he invents this miraculous solution that is this perfect bonding agent that dissolves within a few minutes, and it leaves no trace.
And it doesn't hurt people. It doesn't like burn you caustically like most adhesives would.
It's totally safe. It doesn't hurt people at all. It's perfect for human contact. So it would revolutionize law enforcement and medical technology and construction. If he just released it to the world, it would save millions of lives.
Right? Like, and this is where comics kind of fall apart into
But he doesn't want to save millions of lives. He wants to dress up like a spider.
Uncle Ben.
So
his grief over Uncle Ben prevents him from saving billions.
Yeah.
So that he can save thousands.
Ultimately, yes. Ultimately, the argument is that this guy who wants to turn people into dinosaurs instead of curing cancer is the bad guy because the comic book says he's the bad guy. Ultimately, you can make the same argument about Spider-Man.
Right.
There's nothing different about them other than the sort of presentation of altruism in Spider-Man. The human exceptionalism in Spider-Man.
The one.
So I posted this, and then someone came into my mentions and was like, well, also he's working, a job after school. He's taking pictures for a newspaper in order to scrape by and pay his aunt's medical expenses. Isn't that like iHunt? Like, no.
My God.
Oh, God, no.
Did you just bring that into this?
Right? Spider-Man has superpowers. Spider-Man doesn't have any meaningful stakes in the real world that aren't contrived by the writers. He never has to deal with poverty because he can literally work any job he wants. He is arguably the smartest person in the world within the scope of his own narrative.
He's super strong.
Invented something. He invented something that's like 100 years ahead of its time technologically.
He can never be caught unawares.
He can never be caught unaware. He is super strong. He can jump like Superman.
In the newest movie, he gets hit by a train, not an American train, a European super magnet train, and he just walks that off like 5 minutes later and goes to a festival.
Yes. So this is nothing like iHunt because the stakes for him are all contrived and essentially they could be subverted if he just wanted to.
He went to space.
Yeah, Jameson is the only right one. Mina says, in these stories, like you are talking about people who are objectively exceptional, and in my stories, we're talking about people who are only exceptional in so much as they somehow managed to survive this thing that if you describe it on the outset, they shouldn't be able to.
Yeah, the heroes in iHunt, or the characters, the protagonists, the people we care about in iHunt are exceptional, and this might be a little bit, de-agencying of them, but they're only exceptional in that living in modern day, actual, factual, plain as day society broke them in such a way to let them survive.
Yeah, it made them numb.
A normal human being doesn't do a bunch of Adderall and what's that pill people pop all the time? Opioids. Doesn't pop Adderall and other opioids just to get into a fight with a vampire to feel alive again.
Yeah. That's
not a normal thing. You don't want that on a breakfast cereal with Spider-Man.
When when I was a teenager, I had to basically like lie about my age in order to work after school, so I could work a full-time job, and that way I could pay the rent because my mom couldn't, and I had to basically take trucker speed to do so because you can't go to school for 9 hours and then go to work for 9 hours and then sleep for a couple of hours only to get up and start it again. Like the things that we do in order to survive are ridiculous and remarkable.
I would
And
I would like to point out that trucker speed, which is what it was allowed to be called back then, is meth.
yeah,
Like
it's
just
basically,
for the audience who isn't aware of that cultural touchstone, we're talking about a tiny tot in high school having to do meth to hold down a job to pay rent.
And I think that, like, it's sad. It's, of course, it's an awful thing.
Oh yeah,
and
it's horrific, but
like,
Peter Parker doesn't quite compare.
No, because everything he has, he is objectively exceptional about. Like, he's superior than to literally like everyone around him. And he doesn't have to make real meaningful sacrifices if he doesn't want to.
He doesn't
very contrived.
He doesn't even need to keep his marriage and wife if he gets bored of it, because she'll just die of spider cancer.
Yeah.
He literally is not tied. I know, I knew you'd get that one. He literally cannot be tied down. For a man who makes webbing, you can't tie Peter down to anything.
And the big one that I keep going back to is Civil War.
Jesus H. Christ.
Yeah, the comic book super crossover that was huge in its time, and it like slaughters thousands of people, and it's all about this, allegory for oppression and and the abandonment of privacy for security and blah blah blah.
How to make kids love fascism? The book crossover.
Yeah. It's a great argument for fascism, and it makes fascism seem relatable and cool, but it's this awful situation where tons of people die, and it's a world-ending situation. It's so bad. And ultimately, in the end of the story, it gets retconned in story by a godlike figure who decides to allow Spider-Man the choice to either save
you're going
all
there.
of these people or make it so he never met his wife.
I didn't think you'd go to One More Day, but you went there. It feels like almost every interview we do eventually goes to One More Day.
It's the worst written thing ever. Like, it's so bad.
It's the worst written thing ever, and this is a world where Atlas Shrugged was written.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's Civil War was written on the shoulders of Atlas Shrugged.
I mean, yeah, that's actually a really good way to put it out. Atlas Shrugged.
Yeah.
Atlas Shrugged was merely molded by blah blah blah, but it was born in it, raised in it.
Yeah, Peter Shrugged would be the exponential, like, the natural extension of.
Yeah. So the milquetoast defense I could put up of the character for Peter Parker, and it's really flimsy, is that he doesn't think to monetize all the shit he could just monetize because he did that once, and it has nothing to do with why Uncle Ben died, but Uncle Ben died slightly afterwards. So, it being in the same room as him is what turned him off of it.
Yeah, it's so ridiculous.
Peter being a thoughtless prick killed Uncle Ben. Peter being a thoughtless prick, and 1,000 other scenarios killed Uncle Ben. But the thing that happened right before that was him monetizing his spiderness.
Yeah. So yeah, that was
someone on Twitter came at you, eh?
Yeah, and that's the difference between, like, modern superhero movies or media movies. So modern media, modern stories like that, and iHunt, it's fundamentally different because the values are.
I do like bringing up Sam and Dean and Supernatural, because that was some of the most interesting parts of the early seasons. Like, they would just have a full scene or two where they were like, what's that word for when you rip someone off at a game of chance because you're playing them? Hustling?
Hustle, grift, yeah.
Yeah, they would do like entire scenes in the early seasons of them grifting people at dive bars.
Yeah.
And like that's how they made their money, you know? That's how they got by. That's how they were hunters, which is what they actually called themselves in the show.
Yeah.
Like it could not be more on the nose. And that stuff never shows up in games like World of Darkness or actual games like the actual game called Hunter. You never really see that. Because as soon as you build a hunter character, right there in the character creation page, it says, hey, take resources too, and you never have to worry about money. Done.
Yeah. The
Don't even
actually
worry.
so in iHunt specifically, the where Fate has skills that are just like generic, like fighting, whatever. The iHunt version of that is what we call skill sets, which are jobs. They're described as jobs. So you have like medic and socialite.
Was it at all influenced by the mode system from Atomic Robo?
A little bit, actually. It's
Oh, we lost you there for just a bit. You've cut out a bit.
Okay. Am I back?
You're back.
Okay. So it's inspired a bit by Atomic Robo. It's like halfway between Atomic Robo and Leverage with its jobs. And we actually have a grifter skill. Like the grifter skill set is because we assume that whatever you're doing, whatever work you're doing is just not going to be enough. So you're going to have to.
There is no legitimate way to do it. You're going to have to fill in the gaps with, sleazing people.
Yeah. If you need $20 this month and your job pays $15, you got to come. So
nefarious tasks at a reasonable price.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One of the things I did love about iHunt reading the book, like going through it, is just how laser focused the characters are on that lifestyle. Like Lana has a really bad run of things, and then her friend is like, "Do you want to come to a party?" And she's like, "No." Actually, yes, I do. I want to go. And the first thing is how to go to that party early to score narcotics out of the medicine cabinet because it's a rich person's mansion. Like the very next thing is like, I should go early so I could steal their pills.
Oh my God.
Before other people steal their pills.
Yes.
Those pills are going to be stolen.
So if you're familiar, there's a movie. It's like the best movie ever made, and it just came out last year. Called "Sorry to Bother You."
Oh wait, that sounds familiar.
"Sorry to Bother You" is it's a movie by Boots Riley. It was his first directorial movie, and it's about this guy who works in a call center that is utterly predatory and doing just these horrendous crimes against humanity. And he and his group of fellow coworkers and friends ultimately unionize, and it's a weird sci-fi anti-capitalist movie, and it's brilliant. It's so good. If you haven't seen it, watch it.
Yeah. The way I heard about it was just the first part where it's like to blend in, he puts on a white voice, and that's a huge deal.
Yes.
Like there's a lot to unpack with that entire thing there with code switching. That I didn't know hustle, but I know code switching.
Yeah, he has to code switch, which is to say he has to act white, and not just act white, act the way that white people think they need to sound, or the way that they think they sound. It's about confidence, and it's about selling the dream. But the movie is brilliant. It's so good. It's so funny. It's so powerful, and I cannot recommend it enough. It's cited in iHunt, but throughout the entire process of writing the iHunt series, one of the big influences was Boots Riley's rap group, the Coup. They are an Oakland-based hip-hop group that has been making music for fucking 30 years, something like that. Since NWA days. Very, very long time. They have maybe my favorite album of all time. It's called Party Music. And it had its cover edited because it had the cover was originally a picture of Boots using I want to say a bass amplifier, and turning the bass amplifier and making the World Trade Center explode.
Oh my God.
And this was going to release the month before the September 11th attacks happened.
Oh my God.
And so he had to change it for obvious reasons. But he's like, out and proud communist, wonderful, wonderful artist. And he has the album that was originally supposed to be the soundtrack for the movie Sorry to Bother You. The album is called Sorry to Bother You. He was shopping around the script and didn't get a hit, so he just sold the record. And the record has a track on it called "Your Parents' Cocaine." And it's a song about how they're going to a party with a rich kid, and they're telling the rich kid that essentially, we don't like you. We don't have any interest in you. We're just going to the party so we can steal your parents' cocaine from your house.
Oh my God, that's perfect.
And that essentially, that inspired that scene. It's a thing that we did in college. You go to the rich kid party because they have pills.
My God, that's perfect. Don't worry about telling these stories. We're not cops here.
Well, I'm glad. I figure I probably have an FBI file a mile long, and I'm international. I live in Tokyo now, so I probably also have a CIA file.
I mean, I'm sure it's like the FBI one, but neater.
Yeah.
much better organized.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's it. You live that lifestyle. You have to lifestyle. Everything has to be about the opportunity, because if you pass up an opportunity, that might mean that tomorrow you don't get to eat.
Yeah, keep the hustle going, right?
Yep, always about the hustle.
Yeah, that seems frantic. It seems like it has its own kind of pace to it, like its own energy. Like if you get players that are really buying into it, it can really kind of perpetuate itself. Where it's like, well, we got to do another gig, guys. I got insulin to buy.
Well, one of my favorite games that I ever ran of the World of Darkness stuff is when we were doing Vampire the Requiem 2nd Edition. I was running tons and tons of playtests of it, and the starting hunger rules. I was testing those out, and the first player who rolled, she rolled a botch, a critical failure, whatever, dramatic failure. Mm-hmm. Terminology, it's been so long. She rolled a dramatic failure, and basically the awful situation that happened around this hunting that she did ended up subverting the entire plan that I had for the session and for the entire chronicle. That one situation, trying to recover from that one problem, became the entire story. And I feel like that's a thing that can happen whenever you have these high situations where you're always thinking about the hustle.
Yeah, absolutely.
I play that way. Like when I play D&D, I oftentimes will get caught up. I go to the pub and they're like, "Oh, you have to go to this place and do this adventure," and then ultimately I will get into a situation at that pub that is something completely tangential. And I know a lot of people do this, but
we have a bunch of stories about this where something in the early game derails what we thought we were going to do, and it's like, well, no, we're doing this now, and it's like, oh, well, this is much more interesting and much more organic.
Yeah, and that's what iHunt sort of owns from the outset. We know that the characters are going to do these jobs, whatever, but we also know that there's going to be all of these weird hiccups and all of these weird subversions to their plans. That's going to happen. Why not just jump in and embrace it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm looking. The listeners know that we have little scripts we try to follow for these interviews to try and keep things up. I'm just checking through the box. I think we just knocked out every single question I had about iHunt. So is there things that we haven't covered or things that we've neglected to kind of go over in detail that you kind of want you're bursting at the seams to tell us about?
Yeah, so the weird one, the big one. This is a big book. I'm usually a fan of small books. I'm big into most of my games are 60 pages. I have some that are bigger or whatever, but I like smaller games typically. But this one ended up being very big because I wanted to do a lot of things that I'd never seen done before. And for example, there's a chapter in this book. It is called Think Poor. And it is literally just addressing all of these issues.
All the assumptions and things people will miss.
Yeah, it's mostly for people who've never had to deal with this stuff, but also it's sort of an idea mine for these things. So it addresses poverty from a position of dignity. There's a guy running for Congress right now. In Washington, and he's a great guy, but he said fry cooks work harder than CEOs, and this is the sort of the tenor that I want to go for. I never want to address these as lazy or like unsuccessful by their own faults. I like focusing on not just the hustle, but just the sheer humanity and the power that these people have, even if they're not hunting monsters. Like the struggles that we go through, the having to take trucker speed to work a second job or whatever. Like this stuff is really impressive. That's hard work. That's sacrifice. That's kicking ass. And it's a thing that oftentimes gets attributed to these exceptional people, these Peter Parkers of the world. So in that chapter, I talk a little bit about like things like the paradox of opulence. Opulence, when we think about it in terms of wealth, we think about people who, like Donald Trump, has a gold toilet. How fucking opulent is that? That's awful.
I mean, yeah, it was a John Mulaney bit, for Christ's sake.
Right. It's disgusting. It's abhorrent. It makes you want to kill these people. But then on the other hand, you have the opulence of poverty, where ultimately what the opulent poor person is doing is trying to temporarily transcend class. If I go to a job interview and I'm broke as shit, I want to try to wear the best clothes I can. I want to be able to, in that interview, pull out the nicest iPhone I can, because I want to temporarily grab on to the advantages of a class that I am not a part of. And it's an act of defiance. It is saying that in this moment, you are no better than me. Like, it is saying that if I have all of these trappings of comfort, wealth, of privilege, we are indecipherable. There's nothing between us that makes us fundamentally different as human beings. And it's this, it's punk as fuck.
It's punk in a way you don't usually see in RPGs, just to digress a bit, because RPGs I don't think have been punk, I want to say ever at this point. What I've seen. Well, like Shadowrun, you were glorified murderer Uber drivers who didn't want to take down the system. You wanted to be Mr. Johnson. That was the whole point. Yes. Oh god, I worked for Shadowrun, and that was a frustration. In for example, World of Darkness, it's gothic punk, and what that meant was people who in the 90s worked day jobs at the office, and then on Thursday when the local club had a goth night, they went there and they dressed with a mohawk or whatever. Yeah. When I think about punk, when I think about rebellion, when I think about the audacity to stand against these things, I think about there's a common trope that a lot of people have. It's a racist trope, in that like African American young people like expensive shoes, right? They like athletic shoes. Like the stereotype is they wear the nice Nikes and Adidas or whatever, and you see this on like Fox News and stuff. This is a constant thing that a lot of people throw out, and they're ultimately saying this as a way to sort of make fun of them or to blame them for their own misgivings. If you didn't spend this money on shoes, that you would have a house, because shoes and houses definitely cost the same thing. Listeners will be familiar with the other version of this, the avocado toast defense. Yes, avocado toast is featured prominently in iHunt. But the thing is that to me, those shoes are an act of defiance to this sort of lack of upward mobility, to this class oppression, because it is simply saying that there is no difference between me and the person who has these shoes through a sense of natural comfort, who can just go to the store and buy them. It is an act of defiance. To me, that is more punk than some dude in Idaho who works at a cubicle farm and then goes to goth night every Thursday. And that's the sort of rebellion that I want to see in iHunt, is people who are defying class. They're rejecting those limitations. And that's, like I said, with the experience system, we're rejecting classic senses of reward. The people in iHunt, they don't think that they're just going to work their way into wealth.
they get experiences because those experiences are what are truly valuable to them. So we go into a little bit of this, and I've got like essays on the Terry Pratchett quote, for example, and the way that things are more expensive for poor people, and a lot of things that people take for granted. Like, for example, how poor people have to spend more of their lives waiting in line.
Yep.
Which is a sort of like transparent cost.
Yeah, it's something, and as soon as you bring that up, like if you bring up, poor people have to wait in line more, you get people coming out of the woodwork to downplay that just being life. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's like, no, they physically have to waste more of their time because they're poor.
Yeah,
time they could have been spent working.
Yeah,
or living their life, but specifically working. You only ever talk about poor people and that they could be working more.
Yeah,
that's
but
the
instead
only
I'm burning out my knees standing in a line. And like it's a thing that we take for granted, but it's absolutely a cost. And things like the expenses related to having unstable paychecks, to not knowing how much your next paycheck is going to be, hour change week.
Oh yeah, the scheduling thing. There's a new law in the States down there they're putting into practice that would force employers to fucking schedule people out for like a month ahead of time. Like, you get to know what the next 4 weeks of your schedule looks like, and people are throwing a fit. And I say people loosely, because it's the kind of internet folk that don't ever think about anything. They just go, that's lazy, or how can you control what businesses do? And it's like, you don't have a stake in this, asshole. You literally put zero thought into this. Go away.
Yeah. I go into things like bank expenses, like overdraft fees and how they cascade and domino effect. Payday lenders, moving expenses, because poor people either poor people are stuck in one place or they have to move more than your average person.
Yeah, you got to move farther away. You have to have a longer commute, or you just got to
longer commute.
Or you can never leave where you are because all your family's there, and they're an intangible support network that provides things other than wealth. They provide services and help and springboard. Or you have to abandon all of them forever and go to another part of the country where it's cheaper.
Yep.
And give up all of that stuff.
Typically, in those cases, the job opportunities are weaker and stuff. And in those cases, things behind because you can't just move everything. And so you have new startup expenses to living a normal life. You either have to buy a new can opener because you left the old one behind, or you have to not eat things out of cans, which means that you can't take advantage of those cheaper prices. It's just, and then like there's bits about like the way that law is applied differently to poor people, fines, things like health insurance. I have a little essay talking about the way that health insurance works in the United States, because a lot of people don't know.
I mean, I live just north of it, and I have no idea. Like, I know it's bad. I understand the various aspects just from, absorption and hearing people run up here to get help from it. But yeah, the deeper dives are nauseatingly myriad, and just how much there is going on there.
Well, in that section, I used the example of my first daughter's, which I had insurance. I had the nicest job of my life at the time. I thought I was doing really well in life. Like I was actually performing very well, and I had insurance. And my daughter's birth cost us $27,000.
Yeah, that's like a crime against humanity. It doesn't cost anything up here.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And then there's a bit where we talk about some of the sort of like life hacks, the things that poor people do to sort of subvert these systems. Things like how to get a meal for free when you need it.
Yeah.
How to get a cheap, easy place to stay if you don't have good credit.
A lot of people have like different tactics. Like when I was a kid, what I and a couple other kids figured out is most Coke machines from the early 90s have the same debug code. So you might know this, but listeners, if you don't know this, if you go up to an older Coke or Pepsi machine, the first 4 symbols on the machine, the first 4 selections are actually the control panel. So if you type in, it's an ace, it's like an uneven code. It's like camel case. If you go 1, 3, 2, 4, or 2413. Like it's a pattern like that, odd number, even number. It gets you into the debug menu. You can start fucking with that machine.
Yep.
And like, hey, you just got a meal. High calorie, high sugar meal that'll keep you full.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, the because of that, basically, or not that specifically, but because of the fact that, you know, you use different tactics and things like that, I have a whole list of them, and it's mostly things that I've dealt with or had friends who dealt with when growing up in California. And it's even simple things like going into a hotel. If you go into a cheap to mid-range hotel with luggage in hand, you can get free breakfast. It's they could technically question you, they can technically kick you out, but they don't want to make a stink because that makes the place look bad.
There you go. Huh.
Yeah. So, you know, that's a free meal. You just don't do it over and over at the same place. And just simple stuff like that. Taking temp jobs, like getting on Craigslist and get a banquet serving position. Rich people have banquets that are only one-shot affairs. You have one night, you make about $120 for it, and you get all your food free. And you get a doggy bag.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, just stuff like that. And then things like, you know, how to get a free phone. Just all kinds of things that I guess a lot of people don't think about. And we even talk about things like the degree of emotional labor and just effort that poor people have to put in. You know, a poor person has to work at, you know, the restaurant serving dishes, and the person who is getting that food, you know, the office worker or whatever, they can work their 9 to 5 and they get to have a range of emotions, whereas that server works their 8 hours at night, stressed, overworked, and they have to smile the entire fucking time, because if they don't smile the entire fucking time, they might miss rent.
Right.
And that's a way that poor people are taxed that I think a lot of people don't recognize.
The never-ending emotional stress and damage. Yeah, that's not going to show up in the next... That didn't show up at all in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
As we've all gotten older, that definitely hasn't been a major feature.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's not just like, yeah, it's not just a tax. It's like, it's this overwhelming, just ridiculous expectation that we are all like actors.
Yeah, and catering to other people's needs constantly while your needs are not even being met by it.
Yeah, we always talk about you see like Jared Leto, he's method acting, so he sends to his fellow actors, and like he sends used condoms to these women and stuff because he's in character. He's in character 24/7. And then, you know, at the end of that, he gets to collect a check for a couple $1 million and go home. But I have to go to the restaurant every day and work for 8 hours, and I have to be a fucking nice person to some of the worst people on goddamn earth. And I have to be nice to them constantly. I cannot break character at all. And I don't get to go home with $1 million check. I don't get to take a break between movies because this is a job that I have to do 300 days out of the year.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have to be the perfect method actor.
That's something that I've been trying to articulate with what iHunt's putting down from the book, is that when you're in extreme poverty, people are like, oh, people who are poor are lazy. And like the secret truth is people who are poor are constantly expected to be working in the background, not just at a job, but constantly expected to be working to better themselves. And it's impossible.
We are expected to perform at a high level at all times.
Or
like
die.
There's not a moment where we are not expected to be working our ass off.
Yeah. Or you die.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, they should have just pulled harder on the bootstraps. I know that's a tired expression, but like, fuck, man.
Yeah.
Or, you know what I mean.
Yeah. But that's it. Like, that's like, I wanted to address this stuff, and I like in building the world, it's like you said earlier, there's a bit of world building that is just sort of saying things that are true.
Yeah, like this is something that I said off camera, and I'll take up a bit more airtime reiterating it, just to have it on audio. So when I've been reading iHunt, listeners, one of the things that strikes me is world building in games and tabletop RPGs. And you all probably know this. Like, let's take a look at something that everyone comes to this podcast to listen to, Exalted, because we spike every time we talk about it in viewership.
Yeah.
Exalted has 1 trillion goddamn years of world building. You know, you got what was his name? Grabowski, like GWG or whatever, and his endless amounts of essays about like pre-capitalist economies and how like the merchant guilds would work and stuff, and how farmer agriculture exists. And you have all the stuff about how the gods work and the fake reality about Yushan and about, you know, kung fu lawyers get paid in chocolate coins because it's the stupidest thing in the world. And like that's a lot of work. Same with Eclipse Phase, where it talks about how like transhuman tech and mind uploading and sci-fi tech works.
Yeah.
And that's world building, and it's a lot of effort, and it's a lot to keep into your head. You know, hey, Exalted has 25-hour workdays in his first and second edition and all that shit. And iHunt does the opposite route of just world building by like stating normal facts that are just normal to everyone that people just don't think about a lot. Like, I wish there was a word for that, and I think the word I think we settled on recently was hyper-realism or some shit. Like, it's just facts. Like, why is iHunt miserable? Oh, because obviously there'd be an Uber for killing vampires if people in power didn't want to have to deal with vampires. They'd contract it out to vampire hunters who did exist before Uber, just like we existed before capitalism, but now it's miserable, and now we have a fucking, you know, slave collar on the vampire hunters, which is all iHunt is. iHunt's a story about how they took Van Helsing and made him a fucking fast food worker.
Yeah,
That's all you did in iHunt. You took Sam and Dean and Van Helsing. You took other characters from shows like Supernatural I no longer remember or care to remember, and you said, put on this fucking McDonald's uniform and go work the Chick-fil-A counter. Do it. And then they all look sad and look down, and they had to clean up shit that a bunch of teenagers smeared on the wall. That's all you did with iHunt. You made it real.
Yes.
Like you mentioned that cops pay for iHunters a lot to deal with vampires because cops don't want to deal with it, and they can't. They can't just be on camera shooting people. That would cause outrage. They can't do that. That's honestly one of the least realistic things, is them not just open in public shooting vampires to death. But
yeah,
you know, that we can put aside for the game.
Well, the reason why they can't just shoot vampires in public is because it wouldn't go the way that they expected it to, and it's not an outward show of dominance.
Yeah, but like they would do it. They would come out with shotguns and saws.
Oh, they would. Yeah.
Flamethrowers. It'd be happening left, right, and center. There'd be vampire burning trees. It would be a nightmare. In that way, iHunt is more optimistic.
There are other reasons why the cops don't go after vampires.
Of course. But like
complicated. But yeah.
In the universe, the cops are like, we want people to deal with vampires, and we won't or can't or just shouldn't. So like,
yes.
Well, we want a vampire hunter. And iHunt makes a case of pointing out that vampire hunters did exist. People would like be like, I got a problem, you know, I got a family problem, or I got a problem with this weird people down the lane, or there are these outsiders who came into town, or these people who've been here for a while in that mansion that, you know, run this entire city. There's something odd about them, and my daughter's gone missing. And that would filter through to someone who maybe has lived here for a while, or maybe someone who's lived here and knows someone from something they dealt with back in the day, and they make a few calls and send a few letters, and this person comes into town, and it's all like, I can deal with this problem. And they deal with the community, they make it better, they like shake hands, they get paid, they deal with the problem, they make a lot of people's lives better. It's this whole thing about a community coming together to deal with a weird problem. And now it's just like, now you're an Uber driver. We don't really want you to be like an artist who could do their own thing and make their own impression in the community. We want to make sure that the iHunt brand logo is what people think of when they think of you.
Yes. It's funny you mentioned Van Helsing. He's actually referenced in there's a prequel. One of the novels is called I Hunt, a Transylvanian Prince in Southern California.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an ancient Transylvanian vampire who moves into the Southern California in order to get some beachfront property.
Mm-hmm.
And in that novel, yeah, as one does, yeah, like just, you know, having a normal one. And Lana is hired to hunt him down. And there is a descendant of the Van Helsing who have the Van Helsings have merged with the Morrises from the Dracula story, and they are now an oil company They're an oil family, like the Bushes.
You're killing me.
And the and the Van Helsing, the actual hunter that is in that story, is like a black sheep fail son who lives out of his van. And like he's a rich kid who like is backpacking across the United States to hunt vampires, and he's just not doing a very good job of it because iHunt has scooped up all of the real work, and he's not really making money. Like, so yeah, he's the ultimate rich kid fail son, and it's awful.
That's sad. It's so sad.
Yeah.
But yeah, like all of that kind of ties into it, where it's like, you know, that idea that iHunt took Van Helsing and turned him into a goddamn janitor.
Yeah.
I have no idea where this tangent came from.
Doesn't matter.
Right? All right. So, we've gone over when and where you're going to release the game. Oh, who's working on this game with you? Like, who are the writers, the artists, the editors, layout, all that stuff?
Oh my god. So it's Philomena, my partner, is doing some of the writing. She has written a number of sections. She's done I'd say about 80% of the example monsters. She wrote a lot of the setting chapters. She's done a ton of side work for me on that. But the primary system design I worked on with her. I'm doing all of the layout, all of the art. It's a 360-page book, and it's the two of us.
Oh yeah, what you said? It's going to be an omnibus.
Yeah, it's going to be it's going to be like, I was expecting it to be a little shorter, but then I got into like all of the setting stuff, and how I wanted to like use it as an opportunity to do some ruminations on late stage capitalism and stuff, and it got a lot bigger. Nice. Yeah, it is a completely comprehensive game. Like you will be able to do whatever you want out of it. It's very big, and it's full color. Nice. Yeah, this is me being defiant, but like I worked so long for White Wolf and Onyx Path and stuff like that, and they kept, like, I've done a lot of books for them. I've done bigger books for them. I was the developer for V20 Dark Ages 20th anniversary edition, and it's like 500 pages. It was very big, but I also had a team of like 40 people total working on that book. It was huge, and it's just this clusterfuck. Like, I love that book and I love that game and I'm very proud of it, and I know a lot of people love it, but it's not me.
Tangent briefly, does the Dark Ages book hold up? The V, I haven't gotten into it. Does the V20
I think so. I still to this day I see people say that it's the only version of Vampire that they still like playing. Like
the one you worked on, the 20th anniversary Dark Ages?
Yeah, my version. Yeah.
I've never gotten around to it, and people keep talking about the Dark Ages in Vampire, and I'm just like, what? You're going to play in medieval times? How would you do that? How would anyone know enough about the Dark Ages to do that? It sounds like that'd be a nightmare.
Well, my advice is to watch Terry Jones's Medieval Lives. Basically, that's what you got to do, because it addresses medieval life from a working class perspective.
Ooh.
And it's beautiful. It's really, really good. And it's all on YouTube. So yeah, that's how you do that.
So there you go, listeners. Right from the horse's mouth, how to do Vampire Dark Ages.
Yeah. So like, it's a huge book. It's over 500 pages, but it's not me. It's not like it was still slaving away on someone else's property. And I had a target in mind beforehand that was handed to me. And to this day, I still see it like topping the charts and stuff. Like, it's still doing very well, and I'm not making a cent from it. Like, I wanted to do something on that scale, on that scope. I wanted to do something that's high production value, that's full color, that's competing with all of these other big games out there. Mm-hmm. I could have done something smaller, but I felt that I had to be able to do this to tell myself. And it's weird because I don't think I've ever seen a book of that scope that was just like essentially like a small team, one or two people, knocking all of that out. And it was fun because I researched doing and budgeting for things like art and stuff but then I realized that I wanted to sort of put my own identity on that too, and so I used it as an excuse to like learn the art that I wanted to do and learn to do the layout I wanted to do. So I studied, magazine design and stuff like that. So it's
really cool.
It's been a great experience.
How does the book look? Like you were talking about, I've seen snippets of the art, and I don't know how to describe it. How would you like describe the look of the book and the feel of it and stuff?
So it is it is hyper-realistic. It is it's the art style is mostly a very like sort of posterized pop art. It's all done from photo reference, or at least most of it's done from photo reference. There are a couple of exceptions.
It reminds me a lot of The World Ends With You, or like Persona 4, just how stylish it is.
Yes. It's got a little bit of Persona, a little of The World Ends With You, a little like Sin City, a little like Borderlands.
Borderlands. That's a great comparison, right? I see it.
Yeah, it's very punchy. It's very aggressive and loud about what it is. It's a little weird, but it's supposed to be evocative of reality.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, I guess, what iHunt is supposed to be. It's a little weird, but it's supposed to be evocative of reality. Yeah,
excellent.
The actual layout though is all, again, a little weird, but suggestive of reality. It's all based on like modern magazine design, mostly like fashion and tech magazines. I didn't want to do a traditional game layout. Because I wanted to present the material in a way that was best digestible and understandable as what it was. I didn't want people to look at it and be like, oh, this is a game book in the way that I think of game books.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want people to come with their preconceived notions of what the game should be.
Yeah, exactly. So many tabletop books have this problem where they're textbooks.
Yes.
And it's just, why have we settled on that being the optimal path forward?
Yeah. So in this case,
GURPS set the standard so many years ago.
Oh my God, yeah. So in this case, it's sort of the opposite. Every chapter is a different magazine or a different general design. Like the chapter on character advancement is all set up like a scrapbook. All of the imagery and stuff is all done with Polaroids, that sort of thing, and like the monster chapter, which is the biggest chapter, of course, because it's covering how to play monsters. The monster chapter is like 70 pages, and it has 13 unique layouts. Each of the different monster types has its own look.
Oh.
So like the vampire section actually looks like, it's got this like real sort of like dark sort of gothy look to it. But it's also very like punchy, very, very, very red, very loud. And then you turn the page into the werewolf, which are the next section, and it looks completely different.
Kind of more, I don't know. I have no idea what werewolves would be like. It seems like it'd be more like industrial or like broken machinery.
Yeah, in this case, the werewolf section is like, it's very autumn. it's
like a
very
hunting lodge.
Yeah, it's the background. There's a blood moon. Which is really lovely, and then the next section is like, just this like wild, decayed look. It's very strange, but it's completely different. And instead of focusing on like as many examples as I could, I opted to do more comprehensive examples. Like there's a page for each monster example for, oh God, something like 30 monsters, and they're each fleshed out characters with motivations and little plot hooks here and there.
Nice.
You've got tools to make your own monsters, but there's so many like living, breathing people that are a way for me to show you how the iHunt world works, like how to integrate these ideas into a practical setting.
Yeah, like environmental storytelling, pretty much, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Where even the book itself is kind of teaching you how to think about the game.
Yes. That's my goal, is to sort of get people in that mindset. And in the whole book, like just the little sidebars where I give a little like cynical corporate idea, like a little blurb that would come in the world selling iHunt is supposed to make you think like you are in that world. It's supposed to immerse you, and it's supposed to, like, you know, get you setting aside assumptions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, perfect. So, I think we're coming to the end of sort of what I got to talk about. Is there anything else you want to bring up?
No, I think that covers it. I think pretty comprehensive explanation of what this game is.
So, there was a few other things I wanted to just touch on briefly. I know that you're a fairly prevalent, or not prevalent, what's the word? I don't know. You're an involved member of the San Gennaro Co-op, and we had Disposable Your Heroes on last time, and we were able to touch on it briefly, even though it wasn't a co-op project. And iHunt, it's not a co-op project, right?
No, that's just in Mina.
We need to actually get the co-op on here at one point.
Yeah.
But I was wondering if you wanted to just talk about it briefly, just at the tail end of this. You know, this interview is going to go up for iHunt, and it might be nice to point people in the direction of, like, because, you know, iHunt's design and Disposable Heroes design, we're like talking about happens in the co-op's community areas, so it might be nice to point people towards that if they want to kind of get in on this new generation of game design that's going on.
Absolutely. So the San Gennaro Co-op, San Gennaro is the city that iHunt takes place in. So if you read the iHunt novels, they take place in San Gennaro, California, which is a fictitious city that is basically a blend of Los Angeles and Orange County and San Diego. And the reason why the community is called that, or the co-op is called that, is because the organization, the original idea, came up in a Discord server for my books. I started this community, I started a community as a fan project because I had a few people who were like, man, we really need a place to discuss these things because I want to talk about, you know, the ins and outs of the canon of the iHunt world, and I want to talk about the game that you're going to be making based on it. So I was like, well, you know, if we can get like 10 people regularly in a Discord, then I would love to do that. I'll do that. I'll set it up, and if it lasts for a couple weeks and we get a couple people, then cool. So I set up the Discord, and then now it has like 300 people in it. So it's pretty big, and it's gone way beyond what it was. It was originally just a little discussion group for my shit, but then it ended up being a general thing where we talk about games and movies and politics, all kinds of shit from a very sort of weird left perspective. One day we were talking about things like pay, because if you know anything about my with games, like, it sucks. Like, I've been fucked a few times. I don't want to get too in depth about it, but like things like Onyx Path and stuff, not a good experience for me. And I've seen this replicated all over the hobby and all over the industry, to the point where, like, I'm really shocked that I stayed in any capacity. And we were talking about ways to solve this, and ultimately one of the big answers was create our own products and cooperative products where we can help each other promote things, and, you know, how we can take a little bit of the weight off of each other's shoulders. And I proposed a book that was like, so I live in Tokyo, I mentioned before, like manga. Most of the time, so in America or in most of the world, if you buy manga, Japanese comic books, you buy what are called tankobon, which are books that are basically collected comics. They have maybe 20 issues of a comic in the book. That's not actually how they are usually, and they're not sold in the way that you would expect them to in a Western store. Like, you don't go and buy an issue of Spider-Man at a comic book store in Japan. You typically buy basically these collection books, these magazines that are massive tomes full of different ones. So, like, right now, I'm a big fan of Gundam, for example. And if I want to buy Gundam comics, I go to the bookstore and I buy a book, and it's a 300 to 400 page book, and it's got somewhere between 20 and 40 Gundam comics in it, and they're all different. Some of them are going to be comedy, horror, slice of life, action, drama, whatever. And it's all these different Gundam comics that are all completely disparate. They have nothing to do with each other other than they're Gundam. And then the ones that are really popular, really successful, at the end of their 10 episode issues or 12 issues or whatever, they get a Tonkobon that you collect. But these magazines are where it's at, these periodicals. The biggest one is called Shonen Jump, and it gets millions and millions of buyers every week. And it's massive. It's so huge. I can't understate that. Or I can't overstate that. They're like 300 pages, and you get one of them a week. And usually most people buy them for just a couple of the comics that are in it, like One Piece or Dragon Ball or whatever. And I said that I think that we should do games like that. We should do a periodical that comes out like every quarter. We can't do weekly for obvious reasons, but we could do a quarterly, and just a collection of games that are all creator owned and that everyone gets an equal take. So even though like my name is probably the biggest group, and so I probably have the most inherent draw, under a lot of models, I would get paid the most. But in this model, I don't. I get paid exactly the same as what everyone else does. We all get an equal cut. It's 100% creator owned, 100% profit shared. We did this. The first book was awesome, really successful. So then we did a Kickstarter. Liam Ginty ran called The Role Player's Guide to Heists, and it's a settings or a system genre, system agnostic book full of heists. I wrote 6 of them, and it's a couple pages. You get hooks, characters, security systems, a thing to steal, a map. And then a couple pieces of art. Like it's this little story seed full for your heist. And there's one in space. There's one a cyberpunk one. There's some fantasy ones. There's some modern ones. Really cool thing. And we did this all 100% creator owned. We did a Kickstarter. It was really successful. And we have also
just interject real quick. Listeners may remember the Role Player's Guide to Heists from the one shot we did back when the Kickstarter was running. And if you're interested in seeing one of the heists play out, there's one up already. I know you're on a tangent. I know you're on a roll. I just wanted to insert a quick tangent because it's related to the Guide to Heists in iHunt. So in iHunt, the main character Lana is talking about her ethnicity, like who she is, where she comes from, what she looks like. And how even if a movie was made out of her, Scarlett Johansson or Tilda Swinton would play her, not her. Like they just got a white woman to do it. At the end of the Role Player's Guide to Heists, we did it in Chronicles of Darkness, and it's that heist where you have to steal the movie from the theater. I believe we used the characters from Leverage because we used the Leverage system to run that.
Yeah.
Another reference to you. It was in Chronicles of Darkness. It was the Role Player's Guide to Heist, and we used Leverage. And we used the characters from Leverage because we don't want to make our own characters because we used the Quick Start because, come on, man. I got my whole life ahead of me. I'm not reading all of Leverage just for this one shot. Give me a break. And at the end of the heist, I believe it was the woman character and the African-American character from Leverage ripped off their masks because they were ghouls and revealed that they were in the 1950s. They were Robert Downey Jr. and Scarlett Johansson.
Oh my god!
The whole time it was just them playing, like the roles that weren't them, doing the thing they do. Robert Downey Jr. playing an African American in Tropic Thunder, and what's her name, Scarlett Johansson, just being ScarJo at every role that comes across her.
Yeah, a transgender Asian tree.
Yeah, she constantly keeps doing that. So that was the stinger. And when I read iHunt today, I knew we were doing the interview today. I'm like, oh my fucking god! Like it's just this little cute full circle.
Oh my god! Yeah, that's actually one that I think I've gotten the most comments about. Is that joke?
It's searing. It's real searing. So yeah, sorry to derail you talking about the co-op there, but
we're we did a second digest in the fall. and it's really good. It has my favorite of my small games in it. It's called The Airbnb from Hell.
Oh no.
And it's a modern take on Evil Dead.
Oh no.
Where it's like sort of procedurally generated. You print out and cut out pieces of a cabin that you rented on Airbnb at a weirdly suspicious discount, and it turns out that it's a gateway to hell. Friends all get murdered there. But you procedurally generate this cabin, and you have to survive for 3 nights while the ultimate evil is like being reborn there and stuff. It's
Swallow
fun.
your soul.
Yes. So that one's out, and we're also finishing up the work on the third digest, which is going to be released sometime in December. It's a family version of the digest. Like, not that the others aren't fun, but it's all stuff that is
like each of the digests. You were saying, I think is going to have a theme, and so this is family.
Yeah, so they're all games that you can introduce to your family. You can like introduce to kids. It's a good holiday thing. Real fun. We're just about finished on that one. Awesome. I'm really excited to see that. Yeah. I think that, like, I don't know when it's going to happen because I've been really busy with iHunt, but the next big thing that we're probably going to do. Oh, actually, no. Oh God, is.
You could always
Brinkwood.
You could always release Underhill.
That's true. I'm gonna. That's a complicated thing. I'll explain too.
I'm vaguely aware that there's problems with releasing Underhill, and if listeners know what Underhill is, they're shitting on there and going, "Oh my god."
So, the other one, the other weird one we have called Brinkwood that is it's a fantasy game about monster killing actually, and I haven't really read a whole bunch on it. I think it's like Blades in the Dark based. I can't remember. But someone's brought that in, and that's going to be a co-op project. And then we're also going to do one called, there is no current name for it. It's the project name is The People's Dungeon.
Oh,
and it's
yeah.
an anti-colonialist, anti-capitalist answer to D&D. We're going to use the 5e framework, but the idea is that we're going to have something that is there that whenever people are like, well, yeah, but all my friends want to play D&D. What am I supposed to do if I want to avoid things like the trash that is Mike Merle's? And we can be like, hey, People's Dungeon.
Right. I don't want to commit an entire genocide.
Yeah. So we'll have that book there, and that's going to be a thing. I am going to do something with Changeling. Changeling the Lost as the super, super short, truncated version of this.
It would be an entire other episode to get into all of the fun nuances of Onyx Path.
I was the developer for Changeling the Lost 2nd edition. I developed the book. I did hundreds of hours of playtesting, lots of work, hired writers, did the drafts, blah 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 blah. There's a big complicated hubbub because of Zach Smith, serial rapist and stalker Zach Smith, being hired by White Wolf. I made a stink about it. There were some arguments and stuff behind the scene with Onyx Path, and ultimately it was a situation of, I told them if White Wolf was going to continue working with Zach, I was not going to continue working on these products.
Famous rapist Zach Smith.
Yes, serial rapist and stalker Zach Smith. Basically,
just to be sure we got the right Zach.
Yes. But I was not going to continue working on products, and basically they could write me out after Changeling. I was going to finish Changeling. I wanted them to take my name off of it because, frankly, I don't want a company who is hiring rapists and stalkers to profit from a work that I did about abuse and survivors.
Right.
And I don't want my name associated with that. So basically, I told them, I'll finish this thing, but if they're going to keep working with him, I'm out. Fuck you. And basically, they told me, well, you can't quit. You're fine. And they cut me out of that book, rewrote a little bit of it, and basically refused to pay me for most of my work. So even though we're talking about 3 years of hard work, then they just they told me to fuck off.
So just unequivocally, for the gutless chodes I commonly have to deal with at the Chronicles of Darkness Discord, your money you were not paid, the work was stolen, it is not a brand new Changeling 2nd edition.
I received a partial payment. They told me that they were going to use like 50% or something, and they did give me a partial payment. But the thing is that like I can't use the rest of my contracted work. It's not like I can just take the work that they did not use. My contract was for X amount of dollars, and my contract also said that, you know, unless the contract was terminated by X date, that I am entitled to that, you know, payment for my services rendered. It was years after I took the job, expecting that money. So yes, that's absolutely what happened. The important thing to note, though, is that from a legal standpoint, it's very complicated. Contracts with White Wolf, Onyx Path, and with most of the RPG industry typically say that if services are rendered by X day, that you know, we will pay you. 9 times out of 10 with Onyx Path and with White Wolf products, they run way behind schedule. Anyone
and they
has
know that. They've known about.
Everyone knows this. Anyone who purchases those products is aware that the schedules are like that. Typically, these books will take years to come out, where they used to take 9 months back in the day with White Wolf because of the grind and the way that they did things. But now they take years. Everyone knows this. So oftentimes things will change. For example, I was given a deadline. I worked on that deadline, whatever. As I was working on that deadline for that Changeling book, the book changed. They told me that the book was not going to be a supplement for the original Changeling. It was going to be a second edition. That was a big change that was happening. If you're familiar with the World of Darkness stuff, you're familiar with the way that worked.
Yeah, that was huge. The second edition
I had to go back.
Overhauled everything about all of those games. They were basically brand new RPGs. You can't even, to call them second editions for the way how Changeling, Promethean, Vampire, Werewolf, Mage is like one of the first playable versions of Mage ever. To call them second editions is a gross understatement.
They are fundamentally new games.
Yeah,
yes.
like from the ground up. There's less in common with Vampire the Requiem second edition and Vampire the Requiem than there is between Requiem and Masquerade.
Correct.
Like from a total like top down topological view, yeah, Masquerade and Requiem 1E have more in common because they basically were the same game because of how that all ended up.
Correct. And so basically, because this happened, and anyone basically the books were originally supposed to be supplements. They were turned into second editions, and then after that, they were forced to integrate the full core rules into them.
Yep, I remember that. That was
so
the new
basically,
direction.
The original deadline was set. The original work was done the way that it was supposed to be done, and then it had to be changed again. So the development had to be done in 3 separate stages. Like it had to be overhauled 3 times.
And I'm sure your rate of pay was not renegotiated based on the fact that you're doing a brand new edition of a brand new game.
No. The rate of pay was not renegotiated or anything like that. And more importantly, the due dates were not changed. Like I was given different due dates. I was told, okay, well, you know, I understand that you have to overhaul everything, so you know, take a couple months, do whatever you got to do. And that was just all handshake deals, whatever. No problem. I knew that was going to be the case. Like whatever. So I did the job. And then the final version was like 2 years after the original deadline because things kept changing. You know, that's sort of the nature of the business. And so, you know, I hand in the final version. But now, if anyone were to ask, technically I was 2 years late on my contract. So technically they don't have to pay me, in so much as like if I took it to court, they could defend themselves by saying, well, she was late by 2 years on her contract. Even though, you know, we know this and like we told her to work past your contract date and stuff like that. The nature of these contracts is that like the dates matter about as much as the score and whose line is.
Yeah.
It doesn't, it's bullshit.
It's almost like they're written in such a way to be absolutely predatory and take advantage of that.
Yes. So technically, I was 2 years late on that because, you know, we had to do all these overhauls. And everyone was 2 years late. Everyone was very late. Mage was late. Requiem was late. Promethean was late. All these books were late because we had to overhaul them. And that was an understanding.
They talk about how famous it is that Exalted 3rd Edition came in late. Like, even we bitched about it on our podcast on an episode. It's a great episode. Don't watch it. Ever. But Exalted 3rd Edition came in like 5-6 years late before it came out. And you know what came out a couple years after it did? Wraith 20th Anniversary Edition. They had the same Kickstarter at the same time. Wraith came out years later, and nobody threw a shit fit about it because the guy making Wraith was the original guy. So, you know, he's doing the company a favor.
Yeah. Well, I did work on like Geist, for example, Geist 2nd edition. I did that before my son was born, and he's about to turn 7. And I was just recently paid for that work. Like, we're talking, I don't know when it was released or whatever, but
yeah, I have no idea. I don't know what to do with Geist at all.
I didn't follow that shit or whatever very well. But the fact of the matter is, those dates are so nonsense. But like, yeah, we're talking about the difference of like 5 to 7 years sometimes. Like, it's so up in the air,
right? And like Scion 2nd edition went into development at the same time Exalted 3rd did, and it only just came out in a Kickstarter now. And now the people involved are saying, "Oh no, it only started development like a year or so ago, and it came out right on time."
Yeah,
they're really trying to massage those numbers.
Yeah. So that's one of those things where technically on paper they can point to that and say that they didn't have any reason to pay me, but they still did use my work. And like you can look at the dates, like you can look at the exact, and it lines up exactly with what I was saying. It's a stupid story, but anyway, not to get off on that tangent, I am going to be doing a Changeling book. A shorter one, probably using one of the heists out of that book. That way I can get some of those rules out, because we actually had over 100 people or 100 groups doing playtest games for my version of Changeling. And there are a lot of people who regularly tell me they still use my version because it was complete. I actually released most of it for playtesting. So like, people still use it to this day. It's all out there, so they can't say that it doesn't exist.
Right? Like, all those playtests were feature complete and came out like well within that time frame you're talking about.
Yeah, I released at least 80% of that book feature complete, and it's out there and people use it. So I want to do a truncated version of it that's not necessarily the exact same thing, but that is closer to what my vision of Changeling would have been.
I mean, honestly, it can only be improved by segregating itself away from the Chronicles of Darkness nonsense.
I actually think so too.
Like Changeling in of itself would have been a cool, like, I almost imagine Changeling as being like this RPG that got translated over from like the Netherlands or someplace that has a lot of really big fairy tale culture, but through the lens of what Changeling talks about. It could only get better by getting away from like Beast.
Yeah.
Or Geist. Yeah, like, Beast has writing problems. Geist, I have no fucking clue what anyone's supposed to do with that game. And why Changelings would hang out with them.
Yeah.
I guess they're going to bang?
Who knows?
The Monster Heart's reason, obviously.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's like...
That's cool. Like confirmation that Underhill is something that might come out in the future or might like get expanded on. That's actually really exciting. A lot of people are looking forward to that.
Yeah, I might be able to do it. Like, technically, it's within the bounds of what their Storyteller's Vault thing is.
Oh, that'd be such a slap in the face.
Yeah, technically, I can do it according to their rules. But also, there's been a little bit of like complication with that. Like, I know Holden got kicked a little bit for something. I don't know all of the details, but I figure that it's not going to go as smoothly as I expect. But I'll do it, even if I have to just release fan product, whatever. I don't care. I'll do it.
What are they
just to
do?
have that.
Come to Japan and get ya? You're in Japan. Japan is known for having a very interesting relationship with IP rights in the rest of the world.
It's very complex, but to say the least. But yeah, so like the worst they can do is tell me that I can't sell the thing on their site, which is fine. I don't give a shit. I would like to do it in a way that would earn me money and ironically earns them money. But like, if they don't want to do that, then that's cool too.
Yeah, fuck them.
Yeah, I don't know.
So tell us about that other famous thing you wrote, The Plane, from what's that book with the violence essays in it?
I didn't write that.
No, it's all over. You wrote The Plane. Didn't you hear?
I was the developer for Hurt Locker. I did not write The Plane. So the thing that I wrote in Hurt Locker...
For a little reference before we wind this up, because this is kind of my joke, de-escalation of the interview, right? We'll kind of start to laugh it off as we wrap, but for reference, listeners, there's a book out for Chronicles of Darkness called Hurt Locker. It is a book that talks about the nature of violence and how that changes people and how it can be applied to a Chronicles of Darkness game. It's not a giant book of weapons with rules for using laser drones with your goddamn computer. God damn you. But that's what everyone, and by everyone I mean the worst gamers you can imagine, wanted. They wanted a book full of tanks and drones and flamethrowers and laser cannons for their fascist jackboot vampire slayer characters.
Yeah.
It instead was a poignant book talking about the nature of violence in media.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the relationship of violence, which is like, that was the initial pitch for the book, but I was basically asked to do a sort of balance with character options and stuff too, which is cool, whatever. I did develop that book. I came up with a pitch for that book. I came up with the outline for that book. I wrote chunks of that book, not big chunks of the book. I mostly hired out that book. The only one of the character types that I wrote was, and I can't remember what they're called, but they were inspired by Nightmare on Elm Street 3, the Dream Warriors. Yeah, I wrote those.
The Dream Warriors! I actually get emotions about that and feelings in my heart cage.
Yeah, I love that. And I wrote those. That was the only one of the character options that I wrote.
The Dream Warriors are like the coolest concept for Chronicles of Darkness because they're people who could fight beasts.
Yeah.
Because they could go into the Beast Slayers, because Beast Slayers are in the dreaming.
Ironically, that was part of it, because I was also working. It was a point of frustration for me. I did some Beast, and I don't have time to talk about that at length. If you want to do an entire episode on it, I will sometime. But I was frustrated with Beast, and you can see it. I developed a book called Tooth and Nail for Beast and Hunter, and it was basically my answer to Beast. In a lot of ways, it subverts it and sort of pokes fun at Beast and the problems with Beast. But the Dream Warriors in Hurt Locker were a way to address beasts and sort of face them on equal ground, because I felt that they're good antagonists because they're so awful. Like, you should objectively want to kill them.
Like, Peter, who is still here, he's just quiet because this is what he likes to do in interviews.
Yeah.
But Peter once tried to pitch to me that we would like have Beast show up in a game or whatever, or like we would play Beast, and like he was looking at the rules and mechanics, and like I was almost on board, because once you start to look at what Beast is about and how awful it is and stuff, you can really kind of play around with that and have fun with it and do stuff. But I'm like, I don't fucking want to read the Chronicles of Darkness rules and the Beast rules and like have to put this together into actual goddamn mechanics. Can't we just say we did and don't? Can't we just play characters that would have been beasts in like a game that's like a Powered by the Apocalypse game or like anything else and just not engage with the actual game? The actual game's a misery pit.
That's what Tooth and Nail does. It lets you play beasts without actually addressing beasts. Because it has 4 rules for, which means that they have simplified rules.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Like, no, that's a common sentiment. But the idea was I wanted to do characters who were physically disabled, who were able to compete on a sort of high level or equal ground with some of the monsters in the World of Darkness or the Chronicles of Darkness, whatever.
And that's fascinating.
And so the Dream Warrior characters were, for those who haven't read the book, basically these cells of these like super smart kids who were parts of weird government experiments into like psychic powers and stuff. Like
Stargate and The Men Who Stare at Goats and MK Ultra.
Yeah. I actually wrote a book about MK Ultra, so it came out at the exact same time, and it's set in the world that iHunt's in. It's called Ultra, and it's about psychics on a road trip. But so these Dream Warriors in Hurt Locker are they're psychic kids who were raised in this environment, and basically all of them have like a disabled member who's barely capable of like actually hunting in the way that normal hunters hunt, because they're either really weak, like quadriplegic or something, and they have dream powers, so they can go into a dream state and they can fight in dreams, and the rest of their cell basically protects them while they are in that dream state, by using like support psychic powers. And so like it's a whole team effort to do this thing, because in Nightmare on Elm Street 3, the main character uses the sort of artifacts of her dead friends,
Yeah.
and her dead friends' spirits help her in the dream. And so, like, I wanted to translate that into Hunter terms.
I mean, honestly, it sounds like you could take that idea and Beast and probably almost Changeling and turn it into one actual game. Like that. Just
It would be awesome.
Like that just sounds like
so
that'd be the natural extension to Underhill. Just fold in that Dream Warrior idea or ideas like it, because you know it came from a book about an essay on violence, and the characters, some of them are like disabled in a way that would stop them from being effective people to deal with these problems, and like that says something. And then you bring in the Beast aspect because there's interesting parts to salvage from Beast. Blah 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 blah, and then look at that, it's a whole game. You have changelings, you have kids who are weird, you have these things that are the beasts that are like changelings but different, and it's this whole own ecosystem. But I don't know. Don't listen to me. I don't know anything about games.
But I didn't write the plane. I didn't write the plane. I didn't even come up with it.
You definitely did.
Yeah, I didn't write the plane, and basically what I did for that section was that I wanted everyone to take a different angle to violence. And in my case, it was sort of the unseen violence, the things that, institutional violence, because of the Dream Warriors. They are victims of
kidnapped by the U.S. government and experimented on and being disposed of.
That's
a lot.
Yeah. So you have all these different groups. Like, I can't even remember the book that well, but you have all these different groups that were just different approaches to the way that violence affects people. And the plane came out of a pitch that was basically, okay, so what happens whenever someone rejects violence, but with the sort of realities of the Chronicles of Darkness, where you have magical realism, you have your ideas can become real.
And Chronicles of Darkness is very loosey-goosey with reality.
Yeah, and the sort of the idea is that in Mage, you can technically play a character who is an aggressive, very effective pacifist. Like, you can play a character who uses like fate-based magic to make people unable to cause violence. Mm-hmm. And that's a cool idea, but something that I never really see brought up in Mage. And
that's because it doesn't involve Sideriite.
Yeah, right. Like, it doesn't. Yeah,
fucking Mage
it
players.
Doesn't involve debating about which character can go to which plane, and which splat is the strongest against mages, because mages are clearly dominant. Blah 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 blah.
The mage debates are Sideriite and how joining the Seers of the Throne is good, and how the Exarchs are natural.
Yes,
Chronicles of Darkness fandom.
So, but the idea is that we wanted to see. That sort of concept, the idea that what happens if you use the sort of magic inherent in the world of the Chronicles of Darkness to reject violence. And it becomes this aggressive display of rejecting violence.
Yeah, like, I remember reading the plane. Like, I don't think I even have a problem with them. I don't think I care about them one way or the other, but I remember reading about them, and I remember that what they were doing was really in your face. Like, they drew attention to it. They made you... Yeah. Most people, when they see something bad happening, like, we come from Vancouver, right? There's a street here called Hastings Street, and it's famous for being real miserable because the city keeps pushing people from that kind of sort of like I don't know, step in society into one area and funneling them in. So like, people walking down Hastings Street normally as part of their commute or whatever are pretty good at like shutting it off and ignoring it. And the plane seem like they're written to like make you uncomfortably have to face what's happening and look at it and be aware of it, interact with it.
Yes, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. It's supposed to shine a light on. It's supposed to bring that out. And ultimately, it's a weird thing. Like, one of my weird relationships with the Chronicles of Darkness, World of Darkness, is that a lot of what they are doing, a lot of what these games do, their mechanics, the unique aspects of their world, their powers, disciplines, whatever, it's all about taking your ideas and taking your ideals and thrusting them out into the world and sort of imposing your will on reality. Mm-hmm. That's what vampires do with Dominate. That's what vampires do with Protean.
That's what vampires do with their own goddamn blood.
Exactly. And that's what the vast majority of these things are. And it's because ultimately A lot of these games are founded on power fantasies and
Yeah.
whatever. That not a value judgment, but that's what they are. But what happens when you call that into question? What happens whenever you take different expectations and enforce those thoughts on reality? You get the plane.
Mm-hmm.
You get people who their will is so strong that they are going to say, everyone pay attention. This violence isn't right and it's not going to happen. And you could accomplish that with any number of powers. You could do that with dominate. You could do that with mage powers.
Absolutely. It's the great hypocrisy in that certain part of the fandom that never stops bitching about them.
Yeah.
Like you could play a plane if you were a vampire.
Yeah.
Like I'm not even going to say mage because that's the most obvious thing in the world. But
yeah.
Werewolf, I'm almost certain, has some aspect of being able to do that too, with how they're able to kind of like get people to look at them with being like a pack leader and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't even have to really think about it that deep. The core 3 can do it super easy, but
Absolutely.
This is a minor template in a book about violence that didn't have drone rules. So
yeah. Oh, but I didn't write those. No matter what people say, I did not write them. I think they're really cool. I did lie though. I did write more than one. Because I wrote the Dream Warriors. I also wrote the No. I came up with the idea for the. I remember that discussion. No, I wrote the support group.
Oh shit! The support group that like tries to rehabilitate monsters. That was you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The AA for monsters.
Yeah. That was like the most compelling concept to come out of that book. Sorry. Yuri's group. Cool. The idea that you have people that are like, okay, shit be crazy, but we're gonna sit down and just talk it out, man.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can't get you support networks. You're not just like that vampire from the cover of New Wave Requiem for the 80s, like the vampire with like coke and blood under his nose with the giant cell phone with the strung out girl that he probably hit with that phone at his feet.
Yeah.
Let's put you in a support group so you stop being that guy. All right? Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So that was also mine. I forgot about that one. But I really liked that one. That came from one of the game. That came from a character that I played in a game. We were doing a game and everyone was jerks, and so I made a character who was basically like, well, why don't we reform the monsters? and the GM at the time, the storyteller was like, well, what if the monsters don't want to be reformed? And I was like, well, then we make them. And that's what that's how that came up.
That's amazing. Yeah, again, the AA group for monsters, Yuri's group, that's like an entire game.
Yeah.
Like a whole separate from World of Darkness game right there.
Yeah, I would have loved to have done a game about pretty much anything in that book. Like, it was all... I really like that book. I think that there are people who bitch about the plane or whatever, but I think they're wrong, and they should feel bad and apologize.
You don't have to think they're wrong. They're objectively wrong.
Yeah, they are. They're wrong. Well, for one, I didn't write them.
Listen, Olivia, you can weasel out of having written the plane all you want, but we have you saying I have written and the plane on recording, and we can just splice that together any way we want.
Deep fake that shit.
Oh yeah, it's not that deep. It's Audacity.
It's not like they need a lot of evidence.
Oh my god, evidence for bitching about this stuff? Facts? It says something about the RPG world where like they're all like, oh, facts over feelings. I'm a rational person. I have all this logic in my brain. And it's like, okay, here are 2 timestamps showing that Olivia Hill's talking about Changeling was a real thing. And they're like, oh, it's all bullshit. Over and over again. Fuck you, guy I'm talking about. You know who you are. You know I'm talking about you.
Yeah. So yeah,
but that's a really cool story about Hurt Locker. Like, yeah, that's awesome. Like background development knowledge about the Hurt Locker. I didn't realize the book had all that going on.
Yeah.
Do you have any other stories before we keyboard cat it out? We play us off.
No. I've got other stories, but a very long time. So we should do this.
If we would love to have you back on the show, Olivia, and Yeah, if you have time for us, I know the time difference is brutal. Yeah,
Yeah,
feel
but
free to come
it's
back.
actually not that bad in this case. Like we can work it out, and I'll just make for sure the next time I drink, and we'll just talk about development stories.
Oh my god, I can already see Peter writing the episode topics or pitches. So it's like 9 p.m. our time. What time is it for you?
2
PM?
p.m.
Oh, PM. Well, that's
Yeah.
not bad. That's I can
Yeah,
wrap,
no, this is great.
I can
This
wrap
is a
my
good
head
time
around
frame.
that.
Yeah.
I'm terrible with time zones. If I used to do the Ontario BC time change, and it's impossible for me to wrap my head around.
No, I understand. I understand.
I'm a much more visual person. I can't do numbers in my head. All right. Well, so this has been Olivia Hill talking about iHunt, a game that is going on sale on itch, DTRPG, other storefronts, physical, digital, the whole shebang. So expect it soon. And depending on how we here at Sponsor Nobody can get our shit together, you might just get this interview and a playtest game. Don't hold us to it. You know we're terrible at this. All right. So it's time for the sign off. Let's see if you can pick up the pattern. I was Devin. Peter, unmute your mic, goddammit.
Peter?
And I'm Liv.
And this is sponsored by Nobody, signing off.